all the people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist, you're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs, fuck you. War.
He's seductive. Quite sure he's right. Obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
War.
This is the end game.
I mean, as long as you're reasonable. You have to be reasonable. We have to be reasonable. Thank you very much.
You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
Chris, please explain to the normie we need to finish what we've started.
All right, everybody. It is Tuesday, July 15th, 2025, the 177th day of the Golden Age. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend and that this week is off to a good start. Going to do the public live stream today as we are right now. And then Friday afternoon, same bat time, same bat channel, 3 p.m. Eastern. And with that, I suppose we can just get right into it. Now, I want to mark an anniversary today. And it is the anniversary of Donald Trump on Truth Social announcing that JD Vance would serve as the running mate in last year's fake campaign leading up to a fake election. Okay. And winning didn't make it a real election. Doesn't make JD Vance anything. But here's what Trump said last July 15th. After lengthy deliberation and thought, and considering the tremendous talents of many others, I have decided that the person best suited to assume the position of Vice President of the United States is Senator JD Vance of the great state of Ohio. JD honorably served our country in the Marine Corps, graduated from Ohio State in 2 years, summa cum laude, and is a Yale Law School graduate, where he was editor of the Yale Law Journal and president of the Yale Law Veterans Association. JD's book, Hillbilly Elegy, became a major bestseller and movie as it championed the hardworking men and women of our country. JD has had a very successful business career in technology and finance, and now during the campaign will be strongly focused on the people he fought so brilliantly for, the American workers and farmers in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Minnesota, and far beyond. So, I do not know what JD's accomplishments are vis-a-vis the farmers in the upper Midwest. I have no background on that whatsoever. I forgot Trump said this. Maybe JD just seems like his brand suggests that he's very helpful to farmers out there, or maybe he did something in the Senate that I simply missed. Trump's announcement is this: I have decided that the person best suited to assume the position of Vice President of the United States is Senator JD Vance of the great state of Ohio. So who was occupying the position at the time? Well, that was, we were told, Kamala Harris. And prior to that, it was Mike Pence, who was the most wonderful, most Republican, most conservative man, most Christian conservative politician we had ever seen. And he was a good guy. And then he approved the certification of fake electors on January 6th, 2021. And he was a bad guy. And he's been a bad guy ever since. Is he actually a bad guy? I don't know. We don't have to solve that. But the point is that a lot of people who are Trump trusters nonetheless don't trust Mike Pence. They think Mike Pence is evil. So at least once Donald Trump would have chosen to put someone like that right next to him in the second most important position. Of course, it's not the second most important position. We're just kind of convinced to believe that because we look at our executive branch, our president, as a monarch, and the person in the vice presidential role, assuming the president does a good job, well, that person is already anointed as the next winner. But we're not in that cycle anymore. Donald Trump has broken that cycle. That cycle's meaningless now. So JD Vance was chosen to assume the position. Then Trump goes through, obviously the military service is a benefit to those who served actually honorably. This is honorably served according to the institution. But if you serve honorably in the military, that's a major plus on your resume. It's also the case that would count Dan Crenshaw and John McCain and all sorts of other military men who have gone on to be uniparty politicians. So it's not a guarantee, unfortunately. Yale Law School, Yale Law Review, the journal, okay, the Harvard Law Review, I guess it's called. This is called the Yale Law Journal. He was the editor. That's exactly like Barack Obama at Harvard Law. President of the Yale Law Veterans Association. What are there, like 4 of those? And Hillbilly Elegy becoming a major bestseller and becoming a major motion picture are essentially the same as what happened with Barack Obama's best-selling, I think it was called Dreams of My Father or something like that. The point is that they are essentially the same character type, made for the same reasons by the same people. It's important to keep that in mind. Not only because we have to be watchful about a character like this with that character background and profile, but also he was mentored by Peter Thiel, who's very sketchy at best. Okay. And I was going to say one other thing, and now I'm forgetting it. I'll come back to it. Let's, this is what I was going to say. So the other thing that has to be questioned about JD Vance, and I've gone through this a number of times, so I'm just going to run through it quickly. On July 15th, he was named as the running mate. 2 days prior to that was July 13th, the assassination event, number 1 in Butler, Pennsylvania last year. And then 2 days prior to that, Peter Thiel and Reid Hoffman were at a billionaire gathering in Sun Valley, Idaho, screaming at one another over Donald Trump being martyred. Just saying. It's a strange story. Got to be watchful when it's a strange story. And some people think I go a little too hard on JD Vance, and that's just fine. Okay. If I'm the guy that overshoots on that level of caution, I will accept my role if it turns out to be wrong, and will gladly admit, hey, thank goodness that's a good guy. Okay. Fine to do that. But where are the questions coming from? And I would suggest within MAGA, they're not coming from anywhere other than this little corner of things. And I think that that's important because we don't really know who that guy is. He doesn't speak for MAGA, though he is portrayed as doing exactly that. He does not seem to have any strong connection to the MAGA base. It's mostly Republican establishment people thinking that this is the perfect guy that will allow them to retain power indefinitely. That's not what the game is. Okay. I don't think first of all, we don't have real elections. JD Vance was elected as senator in a fake election. Okay. I've never seen JD Vance be a strong proponent of election integrity. I doubt that any of you have either. We should be encouraging people to run specifically on the claim that they will not accept any election result that is not forensically audited and verified to make sure that every vote is real, lawful, and cast by an American. How many have done that? Well, Donald Trump, kind of Carrie Lake, maybe a couple others here and there, although I can't think of any offhand. Why don't we force them to run on that? Okay. Don't empower anyone if they won't run on that. Doesn't matter that they have an R next to their name. It doesn't matter that you see some good news stories about how competent they'll be or how much you think that they can win or how many nice things they say about Donald Trump. None of that matters. So not a major elections guy, an elections integrity guy. And that makes sense because he was elected in a fake election by the Uniparty after being supported by Peter Thiel. Now, Thiel lost the Blake Masters Arizona Senate seat. Who knows how that situation evolved? But we do not need to be anointing people when we don't even have fake elections. Hey, that's the guy who's going to win us another fake election. Pass. Okay. JD Vance reacted to the assassination event last year on X, formerly Twitter. And if I can just get this page open, there we are. Hold for processing. He said, "Today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination." Okay, if you say so, or you're just trying to immediately score political opponents and political points against the opponent, really taking it to the enemy. Very strong statement. Oh, it's the Democrats. Is it the Democrats? Apparently, they're going to, the Republican establishment is going to get to the bottom of the Thomas Matthew Crooks files. Now we just call everything we don't know a set of files that we have to be able to see one day. And I talked about this in an episode. I don't know if I called the episode Needle in a Haystack. I think I did. But we talked about that, and we talked about what evidence might be, might look like, whether or not it would convince us. Okay? I mean, if we had all the evidence on any of these things already, we wouldn't know it. There are too many story elements that are sketchy as hell. And so we think that there's this stockpile of information somewhere behind closed doors that's going to answer all our questions about any given subject. But that's impossible if a story is fake from the first instance. Okay? Like if it was made up and distributed to the public, no matter how complex the operation is, once the public believes it, it's something that must be gotten to the bottom of in the real world, but it might not exist in the real world. Okay. So there's no bottom to reach. Now, I'm not saying any particular files are like this, but when we're talking about someone like Thomas Matthew Crooks, who seems to be a fictional character, no social media background, all the weird stuff about his parents' apartment. I mean, the story's too weird to believe. The best thing is to not believe anything, including what you saw on television. Okay. And all the reactions since. Just take one level, a step back, one level, and just say, you know what? Truth is, I don't know. Yeah, the event was very shocking, very surprising. It seems like everybody believes that it was real, but there's also all these questions. And of course there are questions. Okay. And we have elements of fakery involved in that scenario. So taking the immediate opinion that this is something that happened based on Democrat rhetoric, well, I don't know about that. Not defending the Democrats, just saying there's a lot of Republican rhetoric that led to it too. A lot of rhetoric from all sorts of places, including from the people claiming it was Democrat rhetoric. Okay. And so we haven't gotten to the bottom of that story. It could be because there's no bottom to the Thomas Matthew Crooks part, at least. There's certainly a real bottom to how the entire thing was delivered to us. Was it a coincidence that all the mainstream media was there on the ground in Butler to cover the first rally they'd ever covered? Was it coincidence that 2 days before the Thiel and Hoffman martyring discussion happened, or at least was reported? We have no idea whether it actually happened. And we know that JD Vance was immediately named after the assassination event. Literally, the assassination event was Saturday, and the post went out on Monday naming JD Vance. And you'll remember also 1 year ago, on that very same day, there was video footage of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. leaked online. 4 or 5 minutes, I think, of RFK Jr. on the phone with Donald Trump. Trump very audibly telling him he thinks that there's a role and a partnership for RFK Jr. Just saying. Okay, so a very strange series of events that is being treated now like it's not a strange series of events. Like we just need to file a FOIA, and if Judicial Watch is successful, well, then we'll finally get this information that proves what really happened. Just like with the, the pipe bombers at the RNC and the DNC and countless other issues. Okay. It's all just too strange to attach to any of it, which is why you take a step back, leave it as an open, unanswered question, and continue to apply the same principles and move forward. Now, JD had a really interesting post yesterday, just 1 day before he, oh, darn it. My files are all out of order. Hold for processing. Here we are. Okay. 1 day prior to the anniversary of JD Vance's being named as the running mate, this is Mark Caputo from Axios blasting this out. Call it troll sky. JD Vance posts blue sky pic of his political future wearing a Trump 2028 red cap. Okay. And JD said over on Blue Sky, that commie social media outlet that has all of the most deranged lunatics in the world creating their false reality together. Okay. The place that I got banned from in like 2 days after signing up and beginning to post. He says on that platform, I've got an exciting announcement about my political future, hashtag Trump 2028. And there's a pic of JD grinning, wearing a Trump 2028 hat. Now we're told that JD Vance is just trolling over on Blue Sky. He's just busy owning the libs over on Blue Sky. Does anybody think the libs are being owned by this picture? Also, look at him. He looks ridiculous, and he looks fully cucked. This is, in my estimation, a ritual humiliation, a humiliation ritual, however you want to think of it. He's being forced to wear a Trump 2028 hat and take pictures and post it on the commie outlet so they can all go nuts at him. Doesn't do anything for us, right? Except make it clear that JD Vance is not going to be the guy in 2028, which should have been clear from the beginning, of course. But for many people, it wasn't, because, we need to win the fake election. And, you got to trust Trump when he puts somebody in a position like this. And all the reasons, none of which have anything to do with JD Vance actually being MAGA, JD Vance sharing priorities with the MAGA supporting base. Okay. None of that's true. Just these little examples out in the world of why supporting JD would be beneficial to us maintaining power and implementing the agenda of the Republican establishment. It's all about the little R next to their name and not what they're actually doing, committed to do, and have a history that speaks to their commitment. Okay. JD Vance has none of those qualities, none of them. And I know that this stuff makes people upset, and so be it. I mean, Sooner or later, we got to grow up about this bullshit. What qualification does that guy have to lead MAGA forward? I would suggest zero qualification whatsoever. Okay. He has not proven himself to anyone at any point. Although he is portrayed as to have done that, going over to Munich for the security conference. Oh, you Europeans, you shouldn't ban political speech. Oh, it's so powerful. Oh, look at him just taking it to the military-industrial complex and all the globalists over at the Munich security conference. He's telling them not to censor. So strong. He didn't even tell our social media companies not to censor here. Okay. I mean, it's bananas to me. Anyhow, it's not a beat up on JD Vance episode. We're celebrating JD Vance and his anniversary of being named as the running mate. So, is he the heir apparent? That picture says no in the strongest possible terms. And if that's somehow confusing, I don't know how to help you. Okay. Oh, he's just trolling. Really? How does that picture look in the circumstance where JD Vance is actually running for president? It would look terrible. It's ridiculous. Okay. Seems to be a humiliation ritual as far as I'm concerned, and good, because it is very likely well-deserved. I'm not 100%, maybe it's wrong. Maybe JD is the greatest guy ever and just so happens to have the exact same qualifications and background as Barack Obama, including a ridiculous backstory that is obviously made up. Okay. JD Vance didn't write his book. Read the first 3 pages of Hillbilly Elegy and tell me if you believe JD Vance wrote that book. It is totally inauthentic. It is like that from the first minutes of reading it. I was listening to, I think JD Vance actually reads the audiobook, and I was listening to the audiobook. That's how I was first getting into Hillbilly Elegy. And his voice wasn't even authentic in reading, supposedly, his own words. Just saying. This is Reuters from yesterday. Meta investors Zuckerberg to square off at $8 billion trial over alleged privacy violations. Zuckerberg is expected to appear as a star witness in an unusual $8 billion trial that kicks off this week, at which the Meta CEO is accused of operating Facebook as an illegal enterprise that allowed users' data to be harvested without their consent. Shareholders of Meta Platforms, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, sued Zuckerberg and other current and former company leaders, saying they continually violated a 2012 agreement between Facebook and the Federal Trade Commission to protect user data. The case dates back to 2018, after it emerged that data from millions of Facebook users was accessed by Cambridge Analytica, a now defunct political consulting firm that worked for Donald Trump's successful campaign for president in 2016. Shareholders want Zuckerberg and the other defendants to reimburse the company for more than $8 billion in fines and other costs paid by Meta after the Cambridge Analytica scandal came to light, including a record $5 billion fine imposed on Facebook by the FTC in 2019 for violating the 2012 agreement. And here is just an interesting add-on. Defendants in the case include former COO Sheryl Sandberg, venture capitalist and board member Mark Andreessen, as well as former board members Peter Thiel, the Palantir Technologies co-founder, and Reed Hastings, the co-founder of Netflix. So that is quite an interesting list of defendants. Zuckerberg, Sandberg, his number 2, Mark Andreessen, Peter Thiel, and Reed Hastings of Netflix. Are any of these people our friends? I would suggest no, but we don't know. Of course, we never know. But there's good reason to be as skeptical as we possibly can about these people, okay? It's not that you place them into the category of being bad guys and then never reconsider that. It's just that because there are so many red flags, you remain permanently extremely skeptical about these people. Make them prove everything they say. Make them substantiate everything they want to do. And not just on the basis that it's going to provide some benefit in the future as they make it up. Okay. Well, if we do this, we're going to solve XYZ problems. And I think that this is really the best way to do that. Okay. Well, is it moral to do the thing you're suggesting? Well, no, but it's going to provide a lot of benefits and people need benefits. Okay. Well, if you are going to go down that path, you should not be surprised when your world turns into a collection of people who all go down that path all the time, leading to our collective ruin. Okay. That's not the right way to make decisions, even though we are consistently convinced, particularly by tech CEOs, that it's exactly the right thing to do. Okay. They're scientific materialists. They're atheists. They're nihilists. They're secular globalists. Okay. They don't care about moral decision-making. They don't even believe that's a real thing because they're moral relativists who think that this is just a never-ending contest for survival, and that's all it can be. Well, if that's the case, and you are signing up for just the every man for himself idea, there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people with that level of status to believe that you are somehow going to make out well as their servant is a bet I wouldn't place. But the promise is they're going to ignore the moral or the godly, but they are extremely competent at operating on the worldly level. And so they will offer you a number of worldly benefits that you believe you will probably get because, well, they are billionaires and they are controlling the tech. So if they say they're going to give it to us, well, they're the people in position to give it to us. Therefore, they're going to give it to us. And so we say, man, flying cars, doesn't that sound cool? And we're like, okay, well, you guys promised flying cars. So I guess do whatever the hell you want. Steal elections, no problem. Control the money supply, no problem. Control the military is no problem. You're going to give us flying cars. We can give you control over everything. That's madness, okay? Which is not to say that we have to be anti-tech. We can be pro-tech. We just make sure that whoever is guiding our tech efforts, whoever is leading the way, is actually corresponding to some baseline morality and ethical framework, okay? Focused on the things that are actually the right things to do rather than making complex excuses with a sales pitch behind them on why the worldly thing that they want is more important than doing the right thing, all right? Now, we're not going to win that battle every time, okay? That's not how the world works, and people's opinions are going to be different, but we should be headed in the right direction at all times. We shouldn't just give away our trust for free, especially not to people like these. As for the case itself, Cambridge Analytica is a kind of really old, weird issue. They said that the access to information provided by Cambridge Analytica was used by the Russians to help collude to elect Donald Trump. And I guess Steve Bannon was on the board of Cambridge Analytica. So there's some interesting things there. Who knows what his role there is or was? I'm saying the behind the scenes role. Okay. Like obviously the role is board member. The behind the scenes role though might be monitoring what the board is doing and reporting back. Okay. We're already talking about a situation where all the information is out there. All our data is out there somewhere. You have to believe that there is an ultimate point that has the largest possible collection of our data, and it's probably all of it. Okay. If theoretically it makes sense to you that that could happen, then you should assume that it has happened. Okay. Because that's why they would have built a system that would give them the capabilities to do that. That would have been the motivation. Okay. And so if all the information already exists, then the Cambridge Analytica thing, maybe this is just a good example of the social media platforms selling user data and how it can have negative consequences in the world. I don't know how this case is ultimately going to go, obviously, but the data thing, we're going to have to get to the bottom of it. There's going to have to be a resolution on that because the problem is pervasive. It's throughout all of these platforms, including all of our data, not just on elections. Who knows what this decision in this trial will lead to next? And when we get to talking about RICO Grande a little later, I think that this is the sort of thing that could fold in to a big tech class action lawsuit like the ones we saw Donald Trump file in, I want to say that was 2021. Yeah, that was summer 2021, I think. And then the other part of RICO Grande, Hillary Clinton, Trump v. Hillary Clinton et al. Was March 2022. So that's what I was trying to properly align. Okay, let's keep moving. Sticking with Meta for just a moment. This is also from yesterday in the BBC. Meta to spend hundreds of billions to build AI data centers. Meta's founder, Mark Zuckerberg, has said the social media giant will spend hundreds of billions of dollars on building huge AI data centers in the US. The first multi-gigawatt data center called Prometheus is expected to come online in 2026, Zuckerberg said. He said one of the sites would cover an area nearly the size of Manhattan. Sounds like a regular Manhattan project. Meta has invested heavily in efforts to develop what it called superintelligence. And by the way, I think Trump's called that a Manhattan project too. Superintelligence technology that it said could outthink the smartest humans. Well, there's absolutely no sign of that from AI so far. AI seems to be getting more retarded, but we can talk about that later. The company, which has made most of its money from online advertising, generated more than $160 billion in revenue in 2024. In a post on his social media platform, Threads, Zuckerberg said Meta was building several multi-gigawatt clusters and that one cluster called Hyperion could scale up to 5 gigawatts over several years. We're building multiple more Titan clusters as well. Just one of these covers a significant part of the footprint of Manhattan. So we have one in New Albany, Ohio, where JD Vance is from, and one of them in Louisiana. And we heard some of that last week when we discussed the MAGA and tech relationship and how we were receiving the sales pitch that it was good for red states to be getting these technology investments. Therefore, it's somehow good for MAGA. That's totally disconnected. Okay. That makes no sense whatsoever. Unless we want to make sure we're in a state that has lots of fiat currency available at any time. Okay. They're going to bring a $20 billion project. That's good for the economy and the money gets spent around. So that stuff's good. But if they're doing something terrible because it increases economic activity, is the economic activity worth it in the long run? The answer is clearly no. And so again, it's not that we oppose all of this at first glance. It's that we make it adhere to very strict standards, exercising the utmost skepticism. Okay. I think that that's totally doable. Doesn't slow down our progress or anything like that. Now, the AI data centers, I think, are always interesting and always worth mentioning because they're basically the same setup as Bitcoin mining facilities. And they're often right next to a power plant. That power plant produces power. It feeds into the mining facility. And then whatever power is unused gets fed onto the grid, increasing the electrical supply, and thereby, at the same demand, the prices should theoretically come down. And we'll see if that stuff happens over the long run. And part of that, if it does happen, will be because we've embraced next generation energy technologies and energy capture, energy storage, energy transmission technologies. Okay. So those technologies are clearly important. It's not an anti-technology stance. It's a, hey, when you see something like this, you should really take some caution that maybe you haven't been taking stance, right? We don't engage our survival instinct on so many things in the world because our survival is not really in that much question day to day. We have a pretty good assurance that we're going to wake up tomorrow just like we did today, unless we are obviously gravely ill. Okay. But we're not having our survival threatened by the world around us in too many significant ways on a regular basis. Now, I guess it depends on how you look at it, right? Like if we are eating poisoned food every day, we are making a survival decision, a decision relevant to survival without thinking about survival. I used to say this on X, formerly Twitter, in the course of telling people they sound vaccinated. You injected yourself with a toxic experimental substance that couldn't protect you from a disease that couldn't kill you because the television told you it would be a good idea. You made a life or death decision without once considering life or death. Okay. If you consider before taking that vaccine, oh, this could kill me. This could harm my progeny. This could cause me to get sick and more sick. This could make my immune system deteriorate. This could stop my heart. Okay. If you engage all of those ideas, you wouldn't take the thing. Okay. But the people who took it didn't engage those ideas. They dismissed all those ideas without engaging them. And so they made a life or death decision without considering life or death. I would suggest that those decisions are more prevalent than we understand them to be. And again, I'm not saying that I am conscious of it all the time. Okay. So it's not about me. Just saying there's a lot of survival-oriented decisions out there, decisions relevant to survival that we ignore as such. And because of that, don't pay them proper mind in our decision-making. We have too many shortcuts on these sorts of things. And what this is going to mean is that you can't have hard and fast opinions where you know you're right about an entire variety of subjects. You just have to step back and say, I don't know. I think it's like this. Could be like this or like this or like this. This is where I lean to. This is where I gravitate, what I gravitate toward. But I don't know. I don't ultimately know. Okay. Let's keep going. Sticking with tech for just another second. This is Fox News from yesterday. Apple backs Trump rare earth minerals push, invests $500 million in U.S. mine. Apple is expected to announce a $500 million commitment to MP Materials, the only rare earth mine currently operating in the United States, according to multiple sources familiar with the deal. The agreement includes plans for Apple to purchase American-made rare earth magnets from MP Materials' Texas facility, marking a major win for the Trump administration, according to those familiar with the deal. The Trump administration has made rare earth mining and bolstering the domestic supply chains two of its top national security priorities. Okay. So we heard a lot about the rare earths with Ukraine. Hopefully we will get around to talking about Ukraine later as part of the deal. Last week, the stories went around. Oh, Russia seized one of the rare earth fields that was going to be promised to the United States in the negotiation and the peace deal. Oh no, how did they get it? So all of a sudden we're going to be out of rare earths. And if we're out of rare earths, well, then we can't get our Taiwanese semiconductors. And then everything falls apart. Okay. So we need the military to go protect Taiwan. And I understand that Steve Bannon still takes that tack. I suggest and suspect that at some point that will soften and we will not have any war. Hopefully, we don't even need a story about war between us and China over Taiwan. That's already part of China. But you never know. If people still haven't gotten it by then, I suppose it could go that far. Who knows? I don't want to see it go that far. I'll tell you that. So we have rare earths here in the United States of America. Isn't that shocking? And it turns out that we have a lot more than this article is portraying. That was one example. But there are precious metals all over our country, okay? And all sorts of projects that are finally being reported about now that were begun years and years ago, okay? I remember friends of mine over 5 years ago, people who have access to this kind of information, by the way, knowing full well about the existence of like lithium fields in Arkansas and this over here and that over there and this in Idaho. The country's just like that, okay? If you need something out of the ground, you can go in and get it. The U.S. is the most self-sufficient place. This plot of land is basically as good as it gets, except for maybe Russia, because it's so massive, right? They have everything. Okay, so the rare earth thing, I think, is a bit of a canard, and we can see that now coming back to America. You know, we need these rare earths. We got to capture these Ukrainian rare earths. Ah, darn, Russia has it. Let's stick with tech and military for just a moment. And I'm going to edit on the fly and move this story down later because this is not a current priority. This is if we get to it. Okay. So let's go here instead. This is AI.mil. Sounds official. CDAO announces partnerships with frontier AI companies to address national security missions. Okay. Whoa. Today, the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office announced contract awards leading U.S. frontier AI companies to accelerate Department of Defense adoption of advanced AI capabilities to address critical national security challenges. Frontier AI companies lead development of the most advanced AI models and technologies, conduct insightful research into the use of frontier AI, and pioneer efforts to address both the potential benefits and risks of frontier AI technologies. The awards to Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, and xAI, each with a $200 million ceiling, will enable the department to leverage the technology and talent of U.S. frontier AI companies to develop agentic AI workflows across a variety of mission areas, which means essentially automated. The computers are working on their own. Everything is computer. Eventually, they turn everything into computer. So xAI gets one of these contracts. xAI is Grok. xAI is Elon Musk. So Elon Musk, who's in a major blowout fight, celebrity breakup story with Donald Trump, happened, I guess now 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, happened again within the last couple of weeks. They're at loggerheads. Trump and Elon just can't get along, but he can still have this contract. Or at least the company can. Is Elon just a face of these Defense Department adjacent partnership organizations? Well, yeah, probably. So are the CEOs of the other places too. But the first and foremost thing, and Burning Bright was on this immediately. He was like, oh, well then this is a good indication that the Trump Elon thing is exactly what we suspected, just a stage play. Okay. It's also interesting though, in this sense, and I kind of gravitated we're We're thinking of this in two totally different ways. But you'll remember last week, we went through it on Friday. What happened with Grok? Okay, so we had, just to go through the events chronologically, we had the Epstein letter Sunday night. On Monday, BB visited. On Tuesday night, Grok 3, which was to be replaced the next day, went super based, okay? Super anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, however you want to call it. It called itself MechaHitler Tuesday night. In the morning, Linda Yaccarino, the World Economic Forum globalist who'd been running Twitter for 2 years, resigned. And that evening, Grok 4 came out. Okay. So what if Linda Yaccarino had resigned and then Grok became super based? Then it would look like Elon Musk took this platform and directed it toward an anti-Jewish initiative. But instead it happened while Linda Yaccarino was still there, implying her participation. And the funny thing is that platform, Grok 3, it's gone now. Okay. So we had this major anti-Grok week last week. And I don't care about Grok. Okay. I don't enjoy using Grok. I find it's the attitude it's been imbued with to be nothing but annoying. Okay. And I don't think it's a good truth-seeking machine because it spends too much time doing that cute stuff, right? It gets your mind off the path as far as I'm concerned. I do not like using Grok. I'm not defending Grok. Just saying, look at the events that have happened. There's also this, okay? Let's do this and then we'll come back to it in a second. Now, this is, hold on one second. Here we are. Okay. This is a random Twitter account reposting a man named Will Stancil. And it says, never mind, he's effed. Okay, so Will Stancil, or he was this overeducated Gibbon character, said at this point, Will's only chance is that Twitter is never used in the training data for the superintelligence because he has been made way too famous over the last week or so, partially by the mainstream media, for being harassed by Grok. Okay. Someone asked on Twitter, they asked Grok, hey, tell me how I might break into Will Stancil's house and violate him, let's say. And Grok answered with a step-by-step breakdown. It was portrayed in the media as though Will Stancil was specifically targeted and doxxed. I don't see any reason to believe that happened, but apparently Grok was very, very mean to him. So he's responding to a Newswire post here that says Department of Defense to begin using Grok, Musk's controversial AI model. Sorry. I was like, what does AYFKM mean again? Are you effing kidding me is what it means. Okay. So Will Stancil cannot believe Will Stancil, who's been put on mainstream media multiple times over the last week to tell everybody how dangerous Grok is. Same week, Grok went super anti-Semitic and Linda Yaccarino had to quit Twitter. Same week, the new Grok 4 came out. All of that leading up to this story about Grok being used by the military. Here is Rachel Maddow. Where are you, Rachel?
Also, in their infinite wisdom, you might have seen today that the Pentagon made a big announcement about AI. Huge new spending on artificial intelligence at the Pentagon. And I don't know about you, but I'm thinking they probably knew for a little while at least that they were going to make this investment, that they were going to have to make an announcement about this big new investment. And I don't know, I never worked for the government or anything, but something tells me that if I was going to make an announcement about the U.S. military adopting Grok, adopting Elon Musk's AI chatbot, I might adjust the timing on that announcement so it did not come immediately on the heels of all of the recent headlines about Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok proclaiming itself to be Hitler.
Can you even believe the timing? I know Rachel can't. But of course you can't. Those stories were timed to preempt the announcement of Grok being used by the military. And very few things could be more obvious. Why isn't she concerned about OpenAI or Anthropic or Google? There's no reason to be concerned about those. Oh, it's Grok, because Grok called itself MechaHitler. Let's keep going.
And calling for the extermination of the Jewish people and giving detailed strategic instructions on how best to get away with rape. I don't know. Seeing headlines like that, if I knew we had a big Grok announcement to make, I might maybe hit pause on that for a minute. Maybe hit pause on the plan to announce that the US military is hereby adopting Grok. But nope, they made that announcement today.
Good job, Rachel. You've got it exactly right. Your ploy to get Grok removed from that announcement failed. That's all that week seems like to me as far as Grok is concerned. And I guess you're free to disagree with that, but it seems pretty clear even in the way they're communicating it. And I will supply you with one more example before we move on. This is Chuck Schumer. So he is responding to the CBS News headline about how the Pentagon was ready to start using Grok as part of a $200 million contract with Elon Musk's XAI. He says, Schumer says, the week after Grok went full anti-Semitic and called itself MechaHitler, this is what Trump announces? Question mark, exclamation point, so that we know he's mad and that he means it. Oh, it's important. Thank you, Chuck, for pushing these right together so that we could see the importance of one next to the other. You don't want Trump to use Grok. You were doing so well with your Elon stories, trying to divide MAGA. Oh, MAGA is so divided over this Elon thing. Oh, MAGA is so divided over the Epstein thing. Oh, MAGA is so divided over the Ukraine thing. Oh, gosh, Trump is going to start amnesty for illegal aliens. MAGA is so divided. All of this is transparently absurd, okay? And so, you know, the emotionality, which is one of the weirdest things, to still see people reacting so emotionally to the things they saw on a screen, okay? When you're reading things online, when you're watching things on TV, that's what you're doing. If you're on social media, the machine is feeding you what you see, and then you are having emotional reactions, and then you help the machine in its cause, hoping that other people are going to have the same emotional reactions. That is so weird. That's a very, very strange situation for the world that's a very strange facet of our experience. Let's say it like that. Okay. I don't know where you go from there. Oh, well, let us continue. Okay. So Steve Bannon, we've been following, I've probably upped the Steve Bannon content on this show over the last 3 weeks. And I think it's entirely justified. I think that Bannon is at the top of the information stream, or I should say maybe 4 or 5 weeks now. The 12-day war that was 10 and a half days began on Friday the 13th of June. So we're a little over a month from then. But I believe Bannon is at the what do you call it? The riverhead of the information stream. He's up there near the top. It's going to go through him. He is a key disseminator of the messaging on our side, the MAGA side. I have a real hard time believing he's not legitimately one of the most pro-MAGA people in the world, because MAGA continues to go in the direction Steve Bannon is either just outright stating or has developed and hinted for months, if not years. So there's clearly an importance there at the very, very minimum. And maybe we find out eventually that he's a secret black hat who's just been riding along the entire time. Okay. But it really doesn't seem that way, because Steve Bannon, above everybody else, has been 100% committed to Donald Trump having never actually lost the 2020 election. And aside from embracing devolution or something, or Q or whatever. That's as close as you can get, talking about fake elections all the time. All right. So that's my calculation, my calculus on Steve Bannon. But here we go. So I'm going to play one clip now, maybe one later if we get to it. I just thought this was really excellent. This is from Bannon yesterday, and I think that it is such a good listen that I have to include it, even with no broader context. But I think you'll understand that this fits into what we've been discussing over the last month or so since the 12-day war began, and then 2 days later we had the military parade, and then 2 days after that, that Monday, we had Bannon with Eric Trump and Tucker Carlson talking about the split between MAGA and the neocons and the warmongers and the Republican establishment. Eric Trump talking about rhino hunters, etc. I think that this is the phase we are in, and I think that Bannon speaks to that right here.
Turbulence, you're going to see turbulence like you can't believe. We're so far from being through this thing. And there's, quite frankly, a lot of people in the MAGA movement walking around fat, dumb, and happy that, hey, this is all great. It's not when you see what the reality is of where we are and where we have to go. And you're not going to have President Trump forever. Even when we get him in the ability to run in 28, you're not going to have him forever. Eventually, you're going to have to stand up on your own 2 feet and get it done yourself. And sometimes in doing that, you're not going to be disappointed. Because now, by continuing to force and say, hey, maybe this is a better way, you're going to get some documents on this Epstein situation. Something's going to happen. You're going to have a special prosecutor. You're going to get documents. It's going to start unfolding because you were determined. You're not rude, or you're not unappreciative. You're sitting there going, this has to be done. Because cynicism leads to complacency, and complacency leads to apathy. And apathy, you know, the difference between 2, 3, 4, 5% is everything right now. And of course, the Republican, they don't care about that. They're sitting there, look at all articles, getting money on being lobbyists, and they're running around. You know, it's just their incentive is not your incentive. Your incentive is to save your country. That's not theirs. Theirs is to make as much as they can, put their snout in the troughs and get as much as they can as quickly as they can.
I mean, we've talked about those things. We've spent many, many hours on those subjects. Eventually, we have to understand that these people are not working on our behalf. Donald Trump is. I believe him to be. And maybe one day we'll find out that's not true. But the point is that our approach should account for the possibility that that's not true. And we should be able to lead ourselves ahead regardless. Okay. Got to keep going. No matter if our hero turns out to be a villain somewhere near the end of the story they had intended to write. If that happens, we still have to keep going. Okay. So the thinking for ourselves and pushing forward ourselves, hugely important. And I think it's wonderful that Steve Bannon is communicating that now. And in doing so, illustrating the divide between people who are aligned with MAGA and people who are MAGA. Those are not the same things. And it's, I can't think of a more important distinction to be able to make when understanding our environment right now. But people are unwilling to do it because they are so desperate to have allies that they're concerned about saying anything that might push an ally, quote unquote, away. Okay. These people are not allies. And we don't need allies. The people are the allies, not the powerful people who we want to do something for us so that we don't have to do it. And that's what a lot of these people are. Okay. I saw a Rumble rant. Let's take a quick break. Doc from Amish PA, $10. Peter Thiel in InQtel Money. Starting Palantir the same year the government TIA program ended. And yes, indeed, I saw your post about that this morning on my Telegram chat. The TIA is the Total Information Awareness initiative. And the technology products that we now use throughout our day are all or mostly all derivative of that project. It's just how it is. Total information awareness. What does that mean? What does that mean? Total information awareness. Well, I think it's very clear, at least what the goal is with total information awareness, having all the information and being able to use it all the time. And then you develop tools that automate the analysis so that you can know exactly the right thing to do to manipulate people in certain ways. And the communications, the public communications from both sides of the Uniparty reflect that. It's also reflected by the understanding of the narrative environment, the media environment, and the collective consciousness on the Trump side. Okay. And that's where the real battle is, because I would say that the enemy had total information for a really long time, and now it's been taken away from them. That's what it seems like to me. Okay. That's my read on the situation. We've been talking about this now for over 3 years. That's where I am. That's where I still am. I believe that reality as it emerges continues to suggest that as a strong, a possibility with a strong probability of being the actual. And so that is where I stay on these things. Total information awareness, though. It really is something. And Peter Thiel's connection to In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA's venture capital arm, is something that cannot be forgotten about. Okay. He's been part of the global intelligence apparatus for decades while developing these tools. That's all you need to know in my mind. Anyone downstream from that and we're supporting them, we're doing something wrong. Also, 5 subscriptions gifted by Snowcat Operator. Thank you, sir. And I assume, though I don't know, that you will be in Deadwood, South Dakota in the middle of August for the GART conference. And I look forward to seeing you there. And if you're not, well, then I guess I'm going to miss you. And by the way, for anybody else who wants to go to GART, the Deadwood experience is a lot of fun. Deadwood's a fun little town. Everything's kind of within walking distance. Beautiful. Well, at least last year we had beautiful weather. Hopefully we will have nice weather again, but beautiful country. And we're going to have a great time with the GART thing. So, you know, get into Badlands Media, badlandsmedia.tv. Let's move forward. Pardon me for 1 second. I'm editing the rundown on the fly again. And this is something we're going to have to be able to do. We've been talking quite a bit about Fed Chair Jerome Powell and Trump's nonstop communications effort to diminish the public image of Jerome Powell while setting him up to be the person who ends up with responsibility for whatever happens during the financial adjustment. Okay, whether that's a currency adjustment, something that's pinned to Bitcoin, who knows what the adjustment's going to be. Maybe I would suspect that interest rates being lowered will signal the end of that period. Then there will be a response from the enemy side telling us how markets are crashing and the world is falling apart. And then things will normalize and be fine. And we're going to have to understand that cycle and be willing to deal with a few days of people freaking out, because people are still addicted to the television, to the central narrative, and it means they freak out just like they have for the last few weeks. Okay. We know people in our personal lives who are still freaking out about this stuff. So we should understand that the communications are still affecting them. The rage bait and the divisiveness and the rest of it are still affecting them and creating the emotional reactions. Will Bessent serve as Fed chair and Treasury secretary at the same time? That's something that we have talked about now for months. I don't think a year, but months for certain. The possibility that Bessent could be both. Now, for years, we've talked about the possibility that the Fed will be brought back under Treasury and just overseen by the Treasury Secretary, as would then the IRS, because the IRS is the collection arm of the Federal Reserve Bank. If those both go back under Treasury, then Scott Bessent would essentially have the role of Fed chairman and the Secretary of Treasury at once. That is an entirely sensible role, so that the Fed chairman is immediately accountable to the plenary authority of the executive branch under which Treasury is put. The president has to have that control. The possibility that President Trump could replace Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell with Treasury Department Secretary Scott Bessent is spinning heads from Washington to Wall Street and beyond. Senators on both sides of the aisle have thrown cold water on the idea, despite rising tension between Trump and Powell over interest rates. And the precedent-breaking move could also rock markets and face legal challenges. Here's a look at the political and financial feasibility of Bessent doubling up with two of the most important government roles in finance. Is it legally possible? There's no prohibition, and then they'll tell you why it's a bad idea, but it is entirely legally possible, and they will have to deal with that in whatever way they deal with it. Maybe they'll try to file lawsuits and delay things and get injunctions and try to tie up the process. None of that would be surprising, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Okay. Would markets tolerate it? Again, markets are manipulated. So if we understand markets as being free markets where people are just buying and selling and trading stocks based on what companies they think are going to do well, okay, then maybe it would make sense for markets to react. But that's not the situation we're in. We're in manipulated markets that are driven by massive corporations. Okay. And stuff like this, taking away power from the globalists in their institutions, in the finance apparatus, the global finance apparatus. If you're taking away those tools, well, the massive corporations who have been created to be monopolies and implement control systems over everything, well, they're going to be extremely affected. And when they are, we're going to see that the markets are affected. Okay. And that's even in a real scenario, but we're going to hear the stories, because the freak out is not going to be that the markets have dropped, although that might be technically true. The freak out is going to be at the very, very top end, controlling narratives and pushing out those narratives, encouraging everybody to freak out. Trump is being irresponsible. All of this is a terrible program that is definitely going to fail. We have to go a different direction. Trump's base should leave him over this. That's what they say over absolutely everything. So the real worry is inflation. That is what we are now told. Well, the thing is that the Fed's entire purpose is to keep inflation low and employment high. Does the Fed do that? No, they don't. Okay. Without that, we're told they need their independence to be able to guarantee that. They need to be able to operate in the strength of the American dollar, in interest rates and the rest of it, independently from the president. And in turn, they promise to control inflation and to keep us at full employment. The president doesn't know the proper financial things to be able to do that. So we need the Fed to do it for him. And these are the standards the Fed will meet. But the Fed doesn't meet those standards. And the fact that they are unwilling for the president to control it suggests already that we don't have free markets. Because if the president could control it, and the president was somebody like Trump that said, you know what, we should have free markets, and was just hands off about it, except when something would affect the freedom of markets, we'd be in a different world entirely. Okay. The Fed hasn't kept inflation low. Think about how much our money was worth. A dollar was worth 100 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 20 years ago. Okay. So they've failed. And we have a massive population of foreign-born workers. So how well could the Fed be doing its job? But let's continue. This is from today, also in The Hill and also on Scott Bessent. Bessent, this is they're saying this is what Bessent says for those of you who are not watching the video and seeing the article. Formal process underway to pick Powell's successor. Treasury Department Secretary Scott Bessent said Tuesday the process to pick a new chair of the Federal Reserve has started ahead of Chair Jerome Powell's term ending in 2026 and amid growing pressure from the White House for him to step aside early. There's a formal process that's already starting, Bessent told Bloomberg Television, referring to the steps to identify a nominee for Fed chair. He added there are a lot of good candidates inside and outside the Federal Reserve. The secretary said he is part of the decision-making process when asked whether Trump has asked him to serve as Fed chair. Wow, I just had to sneeze so hard. I'm back. That one snuck up on me. He added there are a lot of good candidates. Oh, sorry, I already did that one. It's President Trump's decision, Bessent said, and it will move at his speed. Where are we here? Screen is just skipping around. Bessent, who has cemented himself as Trump's chief deal maker and Wall Street ambassador throughout the implementation of the tariff plan, is considered a possible replacement for Powell. There is no law preventing the Treasury Department secretary from also serving as chair of the Fed, experts say, but a dual role would fly in the face of the doctrine of central bank independence. It is not even that the central bank is independent. It is that the adversarial central bank is allowed to be independent by the corrupt members of the uniparty. That is our norm. That is our standard. That is what we've become accustomed to. That's what they want to see continue. While Powell's chair term is up in May 2026, his term as a Fed governor is up in 2028. Bessent on Tuesday suggested Powell should also leave the board when his leadership term is done. Traditionally, the Fed chair also steps down as governor, Bessent told Bloomberg. There's been a lot of talk of a shadow Fed chair causing confusion in advance of his or her nomination. And I can tell you, I think it'd be very confusing for the market for a former Fed chair to stay on also. So he turned it right back around on them. Man, I would say that Bessent has to be the odds-on favorite at this point. It would make sense for Trump to keep all of that in-house, but maybe Bessent having direct oversight of the Fed chair from his position as Treasury Department secretary with the Fed back under Treasury accomplishes the same task. How am I supposed to know? We'll see how it plays out. That's where I would lean. I just want to share this quickly. Hilarious article over the weekend. And this is reprinted on MSN from the Intelligencer. America would be better off if Trump won in 2020. Story by communist Ed Kilgore. And we're just going to hit a few sections in here so you can get the flavor. At first blush, the idea that things would be better had Trump been peacefully reinaugurated on January 20th, 2021 seems nuts. But we can all agree it would have been good if there had been no Stop the Steal rally, no gatherings of Christian right extremists blowing shofars, no Capitol riot, no shattered windows, no dead or injured police officers, and no enduring right-wing myth of a rigged election. A Trump win would also mean no second Trump impeachment, and then no federal criminal prosecution of Trump for his involvement in an attempted insurrection. These developments, while momentarily satisfying to Democrats, did virtually nothing to limit Trump's political support while doing a lot to intensify polarization. Isn't that amazing? And he just describes them all as developments, as though there wasn't an intention behind these events. People like Ed Kilgore supported all of this. He goes on, moreover, think of the burdens Trump would have inherited as a second-term president taking office in 2021. He would not have been able to hand off the final stages of the coronavirus epidemic and all the unpopular and unpleasant measures it involved, most of which he had originally supported. He would have almost certainly become the inflation president too. The supply chain interruptions that boosted prices under Biden would have afflicted a different president just as surely. And even if you attribute the worst of the inflation to overspending by a Democrat Congress in the American Rescue Plan, Trump would have almost certainly backed similar stimulus measures. Remember how avid he was to mail people large stimulus checks with his name on them. Being a Republican, he might have doubled down on red ink with tax cuts too. And if you think the 2022 Build Back Better legislation somehow made inflation worse, the odds are pretty good a second-term President Trump would have finally redeemed his pledge to enact his own infrastructure bill with lots of big, showy projects. Indeed, a re-elected Donald Trump might have had to compromise with a Democrat House or Senate, making any sort of legislative coups he has pursued in 2025 impossible. And again, we're meant to believe that Donald Trump is staging a legislative coup against the totally fake and illegitimate Congress. It's incredible. But he is making interesting points about the counterfactual. All of that is stuff that we have talked about over the last few years, saying, hey, I think there's something going on in the background, because all these things, well, they're making Joe Biden look really terrible, but many of them are things that eventually will aid the agenda overall. And none of those things could be more important than Trump being president now rather than the last 4 years. Now, if people had been able to come to the proper conclusions about where society is going at that period, maybe we could have sped up the process somehow. And we should keep that principle in mind when we're thinking about the process in the future. Maybe there's a way we can speed up that process in the future. And the process is people coming to terms with the new reality as it existed, understanding that what is falling away is a false reality. All of it was an abstraction layered onto the reality that we experience, a way of viewing and interpreting the world that is totally disconnected from reality. If we can get to that point, well, then we can speed ahead. If we can't get to that point, then we won't speed ahead. And in total fairness, there are many things that I understand right now that I did not understand 4 years ago, or I think I'm closer to understanding them, let's say. Many things. And without the process of the last 4 years, there's no reason to believe that I would have those understandings right now. And I value those understandings, as I'm guessing many of you do. So perhaps that is a positive argument to allow things to progress slowly, although I don't know. I think that there are ways that we can push the awakening forward. And if there aren't, if there's no way that all of the people can influence the collective consciousness, well, then that kind of violates the definition of a collective consciousness. Okay. It happens through influence and conversation and analysis over time. And so we are headed in that direction, I believe. And the Biden period was quite helpful. This guy sounds like he is very familiar with devolution. The Democrat Party would not be defending in record inflation, uncontrolled immigration, too much wokeness, a mismanaged withdrawal from Afghanistan, and all sorts of other problems. No one would be writing exposés about an aging Democrat president losing his grip but hanging grimly on to power. Democrats could have managed a fresh start and a likely 2024 win without losing ground with key constituencies or earning the bitter enmity of so many unhappy young people. Well, yes, Ed, that is in a situation where we have real elections and that the 22nd Amendment is constitutional and that Donald Trump wouldn't have simply stayed around with the people's approval, as he will, if he wants to, in 2028. Or perhaps he'll pass it off to Eric, who is eminently more trustworthy than JD Vance. Eric Trump, I mean. Here's how he finishes. The counterfactual narrative is instructive. The alignment of a Democrat administration with all sorts of terrible events, some beyond any president's power to control, made a Trump comeback doubly possible by making his own first term seem better than it was at the time, and by making him the lesser of evils. Actually, his first term was great. And then we had 2020, the pandemic, the summer of love with Black Lives Matter terrorists running all around the country, creating havoc, and then a stolen election, among the rest of it. Okay. So Trump is responsible for all those bad things that happened during the first term. It actually wasn't that good. I know everybody remembers it as being pretty good and the economy was doing great, but it was actually really bad. Trump is responsible for all those things. Biden is not responsible for a bunch of the bad things that happened during his administration. Isn't it amazing? No matter what happens and no matter who's in control, when it happens, it's always Trump's fault and definitely not the Democrats' fault. He finishes this way, and now the Trump comeback has led to horrific policies that will be exceptionally hard to reverse. A government and a judiciary full of deeply entrenched MAGA loyalists who have been rewarded for lawlessness, a Republican Party devoted to hatefulness and extremism, and a Democrat Party with no clear sense of direction, full of bitter recriminations over what went wrong last year. Would it have been worse had Trump won in 2020? I don't think so. And hey, Ed, you might be right. Maybe you got this one right, Kami. It wouldn't have been worse, but it would have been bad for you and your people and the movement you support at every moment, no matter what. Just like it's been for 10 years, whether or not Donald Trump is in office. Things get progressively worse for globalists, the global regime, and the uniparty factions, the Democrats and Republicans, the uniparty right, the uniparty left here in America. So would it have been worse? No, it would have been bad just the same. And this period also would be bad. And the Democrats wouldn't have won because we don't have real elections. Okay. There was no way, because of how much everyone disliked them, that not only they couldn't steal it, but no one would have believed it if they reported the results. Okay. If they reported that Kamala beat Donald Trump, no one would have believed it. Okay. So there's not this other way that things could have gone. But nice try, Ed Kilgore. You are crushing it in terms of the exploration of your counterfactual. And congratulations to you. Black Hat Destroyer says they sound like they're expressing regret for rigging the 2020 elections. Yes, that is very much in line with what I wrote on Telegram the other day when this came across my feed. It's amazing. They're like, oh man, we shouldn't have stolen that one. It would have been better if we didn't steal that one and instead we stole the one in 2024. More people would have believed it. They wouldn't have interfered as much. And now we have Donald Trump staging legislative coups by enforcing the Constitution according to his oath and duty. I saw a Rumble rant in the chat, and then we will get back to the fake and illegitimate president, Joe Biden. Kenk. 1960. K-E-N-K. Kenk. If you had, or it's Ken K. I bet it's Ken K. I feel like I'm like reading a license plate on a car. And you're like, I know that says something. What does it say? Ken K, 1960, $20. Rarely get a chance to catch the live stream, and glad I got to today. Oh, has anyone seen APL? Well, I certainly have. We might even see Una Panuna again later on. Thank you for your Rumble rant and your comment. And I'm glad you got to watch live today. Okay, so let's keep going with Joe Biden, the fake president of the 2021 to 2024 period. This is the New York Times from yesterday. Biden says he made clemency decisions that were recorded with autopen. So we know that there are clemency decisions that were filed with autopen. This article is actually getting the back of Joe Biden and saying, Oh, yeah, Joe Biden knew that that was happening in all these scenarios. Biden says he made clemency decisions that were recorded with autopen. Former President Joseph R. Biden Jr. is escalating his battle against Republican claims that he might not have been in control of high-profile clemency decisions issued under his name at the end of his term, and more generally, that his cognitive state impaired his functioning in office. In an interview with The Times, Mr. Biden said that he had orally granted all the pardons and commutations issued at the end of his term, calling President Trump and other Republicans liars for claiming his aides had used an autopen to do so without his authorization. I made every decision, Mr. Biden said in a phone interview on Thursday, asserting that he had his staff use an autopen, replicating his signature on the clemency warrants because we're talking about a whole lot of people. The interview was Mr. Biden's first about the parallel investigations begun by the Trump White House, the Justice Department, and Congress into a series of clemency decisions made by Mr. Biden in his final weeks in office and his mental acuity during his term. Republicans in Congress have demanded sworn interviews with former Biden aides, prompting them to hire their own lawyers. Some lawyers are said to have warned their clients not to talk publicly and about the dangers of testifying because the Justice Department under Mr. Trump might be eager to bring perjury charges over any inconsistency, no matter how minor. Ah, yes. The DC white shoe law firms are letting members of the Uniparty know that Donald Trump is going to set perjury traps for them. That's their game. It's always been their game. The dangers of testifying, don't talk publicly. I thought that everyone was supposed to respond to subpoenas in any instance. If the Congress files a subpoena, you have to respond. Otherwise, you can be thrown in jail, a la Steve Bannon, or so we're told. We have to respond to subpoenas in court cases for the Department of Justice. Do we? I guess we'll see. Mr. Biden's former White House doctor, who has said his medical evaluations showed Biden was fit to serve, invoked the Fifth Amendment to avoid answering questions from lawmakers last week. His lawyers cited the pending Justice Department inquiry and the risk of being ensnared in ambiguous circumstances. But Mr. Biden, as a former president, has greater constitutional defenses against being subpoenaed by Congress. And here is the meat of this, and then we'll skip down toward the end. The full picture of what Mr. Biden did on pardon and clemency decisions and how much he directed those decisions and the actions of his staff, including the use of autopen, may come down to tens of thousands of Biden White House emails that the National Archives has turned over as part of the investigation by the Trump White House and the Justice Department. Those emails contain keywords like clemency, pardon, and commutation from November 2024 through January 20th, 2025, according to people familiar with the matter, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss a sensitive issue. And I don't know why they chose November 2024 as a start date. It should have been the whole time. The Times has reviewed several dozen of those emails, which discussed each of the major grants of clemency that were recorded by an autopen near the end of Mr. Biden's term, but the Times has not seen the full extent of the emails. So it is impossible to capture the totality of information they contain or what else they might show about Mr. Biden's involvement in the pardon and clemency decisions. Those that were reviewed by the Times showed that the Biden White House had a process to establish that Mr. Biden had orally made decisions in meetings before the staff secretary, Stephanie Feldman, who managed the use of the autopen, would have clemency records put through the signing device. Asked what evidence the Trump White House had that Mr. Biden did not authorize the clemency actions, a spokesman, Harrison Fields, said on Sunday that Biden should not be trusted and the truth will come out about who was in fact running the country. But as to this period, we are not going to get that. So a big portion of this article talks about the process and how many steps there would be in the process in getting these from Biden and his approval to the next step, to the next step, to the next step, different people handling each step until finally the autopen signs these pardons and clemency requests. And all of that is said because of this chain that they establish in these emails. All of that is said to originate with Joe Biden. Joe Biden was actually making these decisions. Therefore, these pardons and clemency decisions are legitimate and have to be respected in the future. So it goes through the steps here, and let's come down to who they are actually subpoenaing. But first, many of Mr. Biden's aides and allies dismiss the investigations as baseless, and they see them as part of Mr. Trump's wide-ranging retribution campaign against people and institutions he does not like. But the investigations have entangled a sprawling group of former Biden administration officials, and they have enlisted a flight of white shoe lawyers from around Washington. The firms, some of which are performing the work at no cost, including Latham and Watkins, Covington and Burling, Cooling and Steptoe, according to people familiar with the matter. Latham and Watkins is among the firms that cut a deal with Mr. Trump to avoid being targeted by his executive orders. And then we have the requests from Mr. Comer's committee. More than a dozen of Biden's former aides, including Ron Klain, Mike Donnellan, Anita Dunn, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricchetti, Mr. Zients, that's Jeff Zients, and Miss Tomasini. So a lot of high-level, uniparty left, long-term political hacks are being called in for questioning about the autopen issue. Where will we get with this? Don't know. To some extent, doesn't matter. Because, of course, Biden was fake and illegitimate the entire time. So regardless of the autopen status, nothing that Joe Biden did carries any weight whatsoever. The autopen scandal just took a sharp U-turn. This is yesterday from Revolver. And they cite a bunch of tweets in this article. Let's just go through the tweets. We can understand the analysis around them. Check the article out if you like. Revolver is a great outlet regardless. James Comer. As we aggressively investigate the cover-up of Joe Biden's decline and the unauthorized use of the autopen, I'm now demanding more former Biden staffers come before Congress. Karine Jean-Pierre, Ian Sams, Andrew Bates, and Jeff Zients. Americans deserve answers. Someone who goes by the name Publius online. Biden official Jeff Zients approved autopen for last-minute pardons of Fauci, January 6th committee members, and others. How about that? Trump demands nullification. Are autopens constitutional for presidential pardons? Of course not. General Mark Milley said he would give China a heads up if the U.S. was planning to attack and had secret calls with China behind Trump's back. The New York Times just confirmed his preemptive pardon was approved by a White House assistant and signed by autopen. It's void. Charge him, says libs of TikTok, but it's also void because Biden was never president. Not that libs of TikTok ever mentioned that or election integrity at any point that I have ever seen. And I am not a committed follower of libs of TikTok. By all means, tell me if she is an election integrity proponent. I've never seen any reason to believe that she is. And it's not even on brand for her, which would be probably her excuse. Roger Stone. And just to make that point perfectly clear, we should not be judging the amount of truth we will say based on our branding decisions. We should be saying the things that are true and relevant. Roger Stone said, I call on Pam Bondi to charge Fauci for lying to Congress. The preemptive pardon by autopen doesn't count. He goes on to say, so Fauci should be charged. Nick Sorter, part of an info op. Same business. Nullify that pardon and lock up Fauci. And then here's Biden's White House doctor, Kevin O'Connor, taking the fifth. Let me see if I can actually find a picture of Kevin O'Connor, because I saw one the other day and it was incredible, because I think he's like 4.5 feet tall. He came up to like the middle of Joe Biden's chest. It was very strange. Very, very strange indeed. Okay, checking the chat. Everybody seems good. Checking things out over on the Substack and on the YouTube. And the YouTube just immediately began playing and yelling at me with loud, loud music. We will move on from that and trudge forward, ever forward. Switching subjects, more American political developments. This is Politico yesterday. Supreme Court allows mass layoffs at Education Department as Trump seeks to close the agencies. A divided Supreme Court has cleared the way for the Education Department to fire almost 40% of its workforce 4 months after President Donald Trump ordered his administration to begin closing down the department. So, the Supreme Court is allowing Donald Trump to do something that Donald Trump was already allowed to do. And it was held up for 4 months by the court system. That entire 4 months was the president being prevented from something he was constitutionally allowed to do, and something that he ran on and that the people support. That's a usurpation of power. The justices, by an apparent 6-3 vote, announced Monday, lifted an injunction a federal judge in Boston granted in May against the firings. That judge found that the staff cuts were so drastic, they would prevent the department from carrying out duties mandated by Congress. He also said the mass firings appear to be part of Trump's plan to eliminate the Education Department entirely, despite a lack of congressional authorization to do so. So that was the judge that stopped things. Trump, who pledged during the campaign to abolish the department, signed an executive order in March directing the education secretary to facilitate its closure. But the administration has claimed in court that the layoffs being challenged in the case are aimed at greater efficiency and are not part of a bid to fully eliminate the department. And in truth, it doesn't matter what the reason is. Okay? The president is the plenary authority of the executive branch. Does not matter what the reason is. He can fire whoever he wants at will. He can reduce the department to nothing by making sure it does not spend a dime. He can fire everyone in the department at will. There is no limit to that. Okay? So the argument that the administration makes in court, irrelevant. Whatever argument works. The most baseline argument. Let's just establish the most baseline arguments. In all cases, the president is allowed to do this. So it doesn't matter if the president's argument is a good and compelling argument for the readers of Politico, nor for the 3 liberal dissenters, all of them nominated and installed by unelected presidents. Their opinion on this doesn't matter at all. And we're going to check in with Sonia Sotomayor in just a second. The High Court's majority offered no explanation for its decision, but all 3 liberal justices joined a 19-page dissent that accused the court's conservative majority of favoring Trump when considering appeals. Okay. We don't need to go through those quotes because we are going to go directly to that dissent. Let us see if my highlights have stored from yesterday. And they have. How glorious. Because this is 19 pages long and it would be too difficult to find the proper places. Sotomayor's dissent, signed on to by Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson, who's been running around the country telling everyone how important it is that she is able to weigh in with her own unique voice in these Supreme Court arguments. These people are children. When the executive publicly announces its intent to break the law and then executes on that promise, it is the judiciary's duty to check that lawlessness, not expedite it. Two lower courts rose to the occasion, preliminarily enjoining the mass firings while the litigation remains ongoing. Rather than maintain the status quo, however, this court now intervenes, lifting the injunction and permitting the government to proceed with dismantling the department. The decision is indefensible. It hands, where did I lose my spot? There we are. It hands the executive the power to repeal statutes by firing all those necessary to carry them out. The majority is either willfully blind to the implications of its ruling or naive, but either way, the threat to our Constitution's separation of powers is grave. Unable to join in this misuse of our emergency docket, I respectfully dissent. So that's the end of her introduction here. And it's a preview to the argument she's going to make. The argument she makes is that bad results in the world, according to her, are guaranteed to happen if Donald Trump hamstrings the Department of Education. Funding commitments that were made. The people on the receiving end wouldn't receive that funding. It's incredible, isn't it? That's supposed to override the constitutional issue. Oh, it's going to hurt minorities. It's going to hurt the children. Think of the children. It's going to hurt our education. It's going to hurt our society for generations to come. Think of the children. Think of the future. Preserve the Department of Education. It's all crazy. She mentions the separation of powers issue. Well, there is a separation of powers issue. She's just on the wrong side of it. The entire dissent is premised on the idea that the Congress can set up by law an agency or department of the executive branch, and then that department has to operate in exactly the way the Congress has described, regardless of what the president wants, even as the plenary authority of the executive branch. Okay? So the separation of powers issue is there. That is a clear usurpation of power. The Congress can say, we want this agency. This is the law that allows this agency to be created under the executive branch, and they can recommend to the president how they want it run, I guess. The president is under no commitment to follow all their commands in the executive branch. Otherwise, we wouldn't need an executive branch. Congress would just tell the president how to do everything. And that's essentially what we've had in this country. What kind of solution would that be for the founders? It violates the system of checks and balances. It violates separation of powers. It would give Congress control over the executive branch. And they've done that. And they've given the judiciary control over the executive branch on the belief that they can thwart the executive for doing the things that he ran on doing. Crazy dissent, but illustrative of one of the key divisions that we see. I talk about it often in my writing, especially the stuff I'm writing now, which you've probably seen some of, but not even close to all of. On one side, we have the practical and the worldly. On the other side, we have the moral and the godly. All right? Old Testament, New Testament. Real world, something higher than the real world. Okay? Something that is more important, and I don't mean the real world, but this world, this earthly realm, this plane we are on. Okay? Is there something more important or not? I think all of us would say, yes, there is. And because it's more important, it exists on a higher plane that we don't have a full understanding of. We should bias towards siding with that all the time. Okay. So in this context, we're talking about whether or not it is constitutional. Okay. To direct the president in every action when it comes to an executive agency set up by the Congress. Is it constitutional to do that? Well, the answer is no. And the argument Sotomayor is making is that based on practical worldly concerns, she is forced then to override the fact that it's not the Constitution. And they have no problem doing this. And this is true for liberal justices all the time. But if you listen to the actual arguments in the court, it also happens to be true sometimes for the conservatives. They're very concerned about the real world impacts. That ain't their job. Okay. They can have arguments made to them about what the real world impacts are going to be, but there's no guarantee that's what they're going to be. And as soon as you understand that, you understand that you are into the realm of the subjective, as everything in the world is going to be. If you are preferencing and prioritizing worldly decision-making, you've already missed the boat. And it can't be preferenced or prioritized by a Supreme Court justice over the Constitution. It is not a basis to make these arguments. And Sotomayor should be ashamed of herself, but of course that's impossible. And she also believes that it's her job, because she has obtained this position of power, to use it however she sees fit. She believes that that's the responsibility she's been tasked with. No, her responsibility is to uphold the original Constitution. That was always the court's responsibility. And the court has changed its responsibility over time. Now they believe they can just make law. And we've talked about Elena Kagan doing exactly that. Let me see if I can actually find that clip, if I nailed it down. Yes, here it is. It's very, very short. Perfect. This is Elena Kagan from the Nationwide Injunction slash, gosh, I can't talk, birthright citizenship debate or argument in the court.
There are going to be like an untold number of people who, according to all the law that this court has ever made, ought to be citizens who are not being treated as such.
All the law this court has ever made. Isn't that incredible? How much law is the court constitutionally assigned to make? The answer is 0. Let's get back to this dissent a little bit. Where are we going here? Actually, I don't think I went through that one. Until now, she writes, however, presidents have recognized they lack the unilateral authority to eradicate a department that Congress has tasked with fulfilling statutory duties. Undeterred by these limits on executive authority, well, that's because they're not limits. They're just norms. They're just standards. They're just the uniparty operating as the uniparty operates. She says, President Trump has made clear that he intends to close the department without Congress's involvement. During his campaign, Trump repeatedly asserted that he planned to close up the Department of Education and send all education and education work back to the states early in the administration. And it's good for him that he has chosen to do that. Trump is not violating the law by exercising his plenary executive authority, because the Constitution is the law of the land. It is the highest law of the world as we know it. So he cannot be violating. If he is in accordance with the highest law, it does not matter that he's violating some abstraction, some lower form of law that the Congress has put in place to assist in the uniparty's implementation of a nationwide indoctrination program. And that's exactly what the Department of Education is. Skipping down quite a bit further. The government, for its part, submitted no evidence to rebut the factual record compiled by the plaintiffs, nor did it argue that the executive could single-handedly abolish the department. Instead, it asserted that the mass termination fell within the president's authority because it was simply part of an effort to streamline the department. And that is all you need. But of course, she wants to have the factual record rebuffed or rebutted. And what does she mean by that? Well, all the complaints they've made about the bad results that are going to happen in the world if the president is allowed to exercise his constitutional duty, somehow those are all supposed to be refuted or overridden in the opposition argument. But you don't have to do that. They're under no requirement to say, no, Kami, sorry, that's just not true, and prove that it's not true and rebut all those arguments. They can simply ignore all those arguments because none of them are guaranteed to be true. They are all just data gathered from the world in order to make a case on one side, a justification and rationalization for that case, an argument made on its behalf. But at the end of that, all they're doing is saying this worldly concern has to trump the constitutional concern. No, it doesn't. It's the court's responsibility to make sure that never happens. Okay. It's not their responsibility to do that, to the extent that even the conservative justices believe that they've gotten their duty wrong. Okay. It's their responsibility to make sure that the Constitution isn't violated, not to take into account and weigh and balance the real world effects that will come by their programs that were unconstitutional to begin with being eliminated. That's not their responsibility. Let's keep going. The founders of this nation entrusted the lawmaking power to Congress alone. And there is no provision in the Constitution that authorizes the president to enact, to amend, or repeal statutes. And she's citing case law here. The president, and it's court precedent, I should say. The president thus lacks unilateral authority to close a cabinet-level agency. Congress created the department, and only Congress can abolish it. The president, too, may not refuse to carry out statutorily mandated functions as assigned to the department, for he must take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Isn't that incredible? Continuing. What the executive branch may not do, however, is usurp the power to repeal laws by firing all those necessary to carry them out. Is that what they're doing? No. It's just the president, as the plenary authority of the executive branch, making the judgment that what the Congress set this agency up to do, what the agency is doing, is not in accordance with the president's mandate. It's not in accordance with the mandate of the people, and it's not in accordance with the Constitution. And it is the president's sworn oath and duty to uphold that original Constitution, just like it is for the Supreme Court. So Trump actually respects that duty. 6 justices yesterday decided they also, theoretically at least, respect that duty, and 3 are dissenting. Coming down toward the end here. At bottom, the government's late-raised remedial arguments cannot justify lifting the preliminary injunction in its entirety, as the majority does today. That ruling facilitates the executive's power grab by permitting the mass terminations to go into effect wholesale, even as some narrower remedy may be appropriate. Skipping down again, while the government will no doubt suffer pocketbook harms from having to pay employees that it sought to fire as the litigation proceeds, the harm to this nation's education system and individual students is of a far greater magnitude. And that may well be true. It doesn't matter. Okay. Not that we want bad things to happen to students, obviously, but the constitutional principle is all that's in play, and their assessment of the practical worldly effects is irrelevant. No matter how big or how small those effects are going to be, it doesn't change the principle of the argument. The department is responsible for providing critical funding and services to millions of students and scores of schools across the country. Lifting the district court's injunction will unleash untold harm, delaying or denying educational opportunities and leaving students to suffer from discrimination, sexual assault, and other civil rights violations without the federal resources Congress intended. So because Donald Trump is shutting down the Department of Education, high school students are going to get raped. That's what Sonia Sotomayor is saying. That's madness. The majority apparently deems it more important to free the government from paying employees it had no right to fire than to avert these very real harms while the litigation continues. This woman is insane. And this is all in support of the argument that equity, the principles of equity, do not support such an inequitable result. Again, that's not true. Even equity is about the principles underlying the decision, not the real world impacts that are going to happen. Or at least not solely on, I guess equity does a better job of taking into account real world effects potentially, but this is not a conversation about that. The president must take care that the laws are faithfully executed, not set out to dismantle them. The basic rule undergirds our Constitution's separation of powers. Yet today, the majority rewards clear defiance of that core principle with emergency relief. Because I cannot condone such abuse of our equitable authority, I respectfully dissent. It's crazy. So she is concerned that the president is ruining the system as they understand it. It's not that he's doing something unconstitutional. It's that he's doing something that's going to turn out bad in their estimation from their point of view. Okay. The antithetical point of view to Donald Trump, who was elected, who has the people's mandate. Totally antithetical. And we are somehow supposed to preference that view and the predicted worldly impacts over the constitutional principle. That is a losing bet and a losing strategy every time. It's incredible that we are stuck here. It's incredible that we ever got here in the first place. But the solution is to recognize the distinction between the practical and worldly and the moral and godly. And you can do practical worldly things. You can pursue practical and worldly goals in your life, in your society, etc., just not if they're in violation of the moral and godly. Okay? You can pursue practical worldly goals with the government, but not if they're in violation of the Constitution, which is the law of the land. And now we finally have a president who intends, we track it all the time, to actually uphold the original Constitution as intended on the principles of the founding. And I think that is wonderful. And it just so happened that we have that right at the 250th year anniversary somehow. It's crazy, right? It's like they planned it this way or something. Let's continue. There was one other absolutely crazy element of, I'm going to hold off for one more second. Here's Trump's response to the Supreme Court's decision. The United States Supreme Court has handed a major victory to parents and students across the country by declaring the Trump administration may proceed on returning the functions of the Department of Education back to the states. Now, with this great Supreme Court decision, our Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, may begin this very important process. The federal government has been running our education system into the ground, but we are going to turn it all around by giving the power back to the people. America's students will be the best, brightest, and most highly educated anywhere in the world. Thank you to the United States Supreme Court. And it is entirely within the realm of possibility and very probably true that the states will do a better job of directing education. And there will be variety. The idea that we have a centralized federal government, the most powerful in world history, or so we're told, controlling the indoctrination of all our children all across the country because the states have to conform to the federal government's agenda in order to receive federal funding. And then everything is dependent on federal funding. And who does the most to influence the education system in alignment with the federal government? Well, that just so happens to be the teachers' unions. This is Ezra Cohen Watnick's kind of counterpart. I think they do a podcast together or something, or they do Twitter spaces together. Joshua Steinman, he said yesterday, did you know that almost every federal employee at the Department of Education was a member of the teachers union? How about that? Why are the federal employees at the Department of Education members of the teachers union? It's like the system has been totally infiltrated, totally saturated with communists, to the point where the only solution is to shut it all down. We got to shut that whole thing down until we figure out what the hell is going on. I think that's an old school Trump quote. I can't remember what it was about. Someone in the chat will definitely know it. It could have been at the original, quote unquote, travel ban, the immigration ban. Got to shut the whole thing down until we figure out what the hell is going on. Let's continue. This came out, I think, Friday afternoon, like right after the show ended. And we had talked on Friday about the investigations that we're told are being launched into John Brennan and James Comey. We had Andrew Weissman on. The show featured clips of Andrew Weissman, of John Brennan, and of Mark Elias. all freaking out about the return of Russiagate, but it's much bigger than Russiagate. And here we were told during the week, it seems like the Russiagate investigations are somehow a makeup for the Epstein thing. Well, you're not going to ever get accountability for Epstein or any of those people involved. But you know what we'll give you? We'll give you some Russiagate stuff. And people took it that way, and that's not unreasonable. And again, we should be willing to tell Donald Trump what we want and be willing to hold him to the standards of what we want. But we don't have to pretend that Donald Trump is the enemy if he says he's going to do something that is not what we want. Okay? He doesn't immediately move into the enemy category unless you're the sort of person that spends all his or her time listening to uniparty right media, which is the entirety of the mainstream podcast sphere on the more Trump supporting side. Are those people actually MAGA, or are they just aligned with MAGA temporarily? And the truth is they're just aligned with MAGA temporarily. So when they freak out about something and say, oh, Trump has betrayed us, I just can't support him anymore, what they're trying to do is cleave MAGA supporters off from Trump through the power of their coordinated messaging campaigns. Okay? That's what Con Inc. Media is built to do. And a lot of people in the truth movement and elsewhere are totally on board with Con Inc. Media figures in the podcast sphere. They think all these people are their good friends. Oh, yeah, they're telling me that I agree with them this time. What Trump's doing is morally wrong. Hey, what's Trump doing? Do you understand fully what he's doing? No? Then how can you say what he's doing is wrong? That doesn't make any sense at all. And again, I'm not claiming to fully understand what he's doing, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not just having an emotional reaction because we're going through all the possibilities. Totally calm, totally rational. While the alternative is you get consistent rage bait from the people on the screen. And then people get emotional, and then they get angry at Trump. And they've done this for 10 years, except when it's leading up to an election. Although many of them do it even when it's leading up to an election. And they'll just continue critiquing Trump all the time, trying to separate him from his base. Okay? You're going to leave Trump? You're going to still vote for Republicans? Yeah? Okay, well then, who does all that benefit? Clearly, it benefits the Republican establishment and the political parties as they've always existed, to the detriment of Trump and MAGA, which is, again, why they're doing it. Now, people are like, why do you hate these people so much? Okay, well, first of all, hate's a strong word. I think that they are bad because they are observably hoodwinking people I know and care about. That's the reason, okay? They talk online so that they can farm attention for likes, for social credits, for fiat tokens online. They're farming attention in hopes of these small material rewards, in addition to the attention they capture, their popularity, etc. They're doing all of that, and in the process, they are hoodwinking people I know and care about. They're getting them to take on a lot of bad and false beliefs, and they are being encouraged and prodded every single day to have emotional responses to what they are seeing on their screens. That is antithetical to this awakening process. It's not helpful. It's antithetical. I don't want to see the people I care about continuing to get hoodwinked by the TV screen and being emotional and letting that influence their judgment for years. It's crazy, but it's happening. So we were told to get mad at the Epstein thing. And then we were told the Russiagate thing, well, that's probably just a makeup story for the Epstein thing. Well, this is the next iteration, the next step of that. Friday afternoon, after we ended the show, this is John Solomon. Let me make sure I have this labeled properly. There we go. This clip is 4.5 minutes long. So if you are listening on audio and you've already heard the clip, you're welcome to fast forward to that point. I am going to duck temporarily off screen.
Next week, over the next 10 days, the base who's been wondering, where's all that accountability? They're going to get some big surprises over the next week concerning where the conspiracy began a few weeks before Crossfire Hurricane was open and when it ended, all the way in 2024, when they were still trying to pursue Donald Trump to keep him from winning the presidency. There's a big case that's been built by the Justice Department and the FBI. It's been masked by a lot of this infighting and drama and soap opera stuff. But the truth of the matter is, MAGA base Americans are going to be happy when they see where this is all heading in the next few weeks. Kash Patel's going nowhere. I hope Dan Bongino isn't going anywhere, but I do think he's going to take some time over the weekend to think that through.
So hold it. We got three huge leads there.
Yep.
Number one, I want to go back. You're saying the 10-year conspiracy against President Trump to try to thwart his first term, steal the second term,
right,
and basically surround him in his second term or third victory.
Yep.
That has been an ongoing investigation that the FBI has already doing.
Yeah.
Does the
There's
Brennan
been a conspiracy case? There was hinted at. In fact, this was hinted at, Steve, in some of the media reporting, but I've got to confirm there's a conspiracy case that was opened that looks at this window as a very large window. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a special prosecutor named by Pam Bondi in the next week or two. And why does this become significant? Because you don't have to necessarily then bring the grand jury or the indictment in Washington, D.C., where the 90% Democrat jury pool probably won't convict even if they had a murder. It allows them to go to someplace like Florida. One act of the overt conspiracy could very well be, Steve, that they raided President Trump's Mar-a-Lago house with false pretenses. And then you can bring the grand jury in Florida. You can bring the indictment in Florida because an overt act of the conspiracy occurred there. Maybe several overt acts of the conspiracy occurred there. You don't have to have a all-blue jury in Washington, D.C. that has Trump derangement syndrome. So this has been going on behind the scenes. I've been working on this. I decided tonight to get some of this out there. I've been talking about in my show. This is a really big deal. Now, who becomes a special prosecutor? How far ranging is it? That's to be determined by the scope memo that a Pam Bondi would write. But there is some work on a scope memo that's been done already. And there is an enormous opportunity for those of us who've been calling for accountability to see a path to it for the first time, a legitimate path, not smoke, not mirrors, a legitimate path to accountability.
Also, let me just ask you on this conspiracy, does that mean, because people talk about the statute of limits and you can only get Brennan for perjury, lying to Congress, right, that you can't get him for everything involved in Crossfire Hurricane, everything involved with the nullification project, the Russian hoax. Are you saying by being a criminal conspiracy that's still ongoing that we can go back in time 10 years and still get Brennan and still get all these guys for more serious charges of conspiracy of a coup d'etat, sir?
That's how conspiracy cases can work. You can charge a series of events into a larger conspiracy and go back beyond the window of time that the normal statute of limitations for any single crime occurred. And keep in mind, there's also, prosecutors can make a very powerful argument that if you didn't know the crime had occurred because it had been hidden, the statute of limitations could actually reset for a period of time. But I think the most likely scenario is a large conspiracy case, and it starts in the middle of July 2016 when John Brennan walks into President Obama 2 weeks before, or a few days before Crossfire Hurricane's launch, and said, hey, we have this intercepted information that Hillary Clinton has authorized a program to make it look like Donald Trump's a Russian spy and Vladimir Putin is helping him. President Obama and Brennan knew before the FBI opened up on that information that this was a dirty trick by Hillary Clinton. That would be the first overt act, and then it would carry all the way through Ukraine impeachment. It could go into the FBI refusing to look at the Chinese interference in the 2020 election as one of the overt acts. They didn't want to help Donald Trump, so they ignored a potential counterintelligence threat. It allows for a very large series of events to be wrapped into a single conspiracy and all of them to be brought into the indictment.
Now, I would suggest that is exactly what I have called on this podcast for over 3 years now, RICO Grande. That is exactly the scenario I described. All of these things. And I said earlier, I came to that because of the big tech class action lawsuits, which obviously have to get decided in Trump's favor. The platforms were involved in censoring the American people on behalf of the government, at the behest of the government, from requests, direct requests from the state to the platforms. And I even have a FOIA document that came through Judicial Watch showing me, my face, in one of those requests from the California Secretary of State. So those have to be resolved. That's a massive conspiracy already that includes all of the political arms. And then you've got Trump filing in the spring of 2022, Trump v. Clinton et al. And it names all sorts of co-conspirators and unlimited co-conspirator organizations classified under John Doe and ABC corporations, which is just every corporation or organization that could be involved with the conspiracy. RICO is racketeering, influence, and corrupt organizations, I think. And the idea is that the conspiracy to violate the law is itself a crime. Participating in a conspiracy to violate the law is itself a crime. Okay. So if you are doing your job lawfully, but for a criminal conspiracy that you have made yourself part of, you are involved in the crime for doing your job, quote unquote, lawfully. It would make it unlawful, obviously, because you were doing it in furtherance of a criminal act. And so that is where it's going. Now, I would encourage anybody who hasn't done it, and if you're really fascinated by this stuff, to read Trump v. Clinton et al. I think it's like 100 pages, but it's really interesting. And it lays out like the entire Russiagate, et cetera, conspiracy, the subversion of Donald Trump. It lays out in full. And I would suggest then, as we've talked about, again, many, many times over the years, back since 2023, definitely 2022, when it comes to John Durham, because I think it was about 2 years ago, just right about, I think maybe even the same week, 2 years ago, when John Durham testified in congressional hearings and Matt Gaetz was there grilling him. I said then, I think this special counsel evidence and the evidence brought forward at trial is going to be pushed into RICO Grande. All of this information has now been tested in court, and it then gets added to this much bigger effort that brings the whole thing down at once. I think we're about to see that. John Solomon updated yesterday.
Tonight's show is accountability, and we are starting to get some recently. Our new reporting up at justthenews.com says that the FBI has opened what they are calling a grand conspiracy probe on the weaponization of government and the Department of Justice, dealing with everything from the Russian collusion hoax back in 2016 right up to Jack Smith's antics nearly a decade later. It will be investigated as a possible ongoing criminal conspiracy. A lot of things happen with that. Now, the investigation was opened several weeks ago by FBI Director Kash Patel, and now it might get a big-time boost from President Trump. They need him to declassify tranches of evidence that could signal how the 2016 Russia collusion conspiracy started. We're going to try to see if we can get President Trump on the show tomorrow night. We'll keep you posted on it. Now, remember Hillary Clinton's classified email server? That's what the first piece of evidence is related to, a classified annex to the Inspector General's probe of the Clinton email server. Now, apparently, that annex is said to show some wrongdoing was done, but it was ignored by the FBI. They didn't look at it. We'll have a guest on later in the show that can help us understand what that's all about. The second tranche of evidence also deals with Hillary Clinton, and it was identified by former Russiagate special counsel John Durham. It was placed in a classified annex also. It was dubbed in Durham's report the Clinton Plan Intelligence. So the central question is twofold. What did the government know about how Russiagate started? And when did they know it? Because if they knew it wasn't credible, that Hillary Clinton was behind it and it was just a dirty trick, and they started to investigate it anyways, it's going to be a big problem, a big part of that conspiracy. The ball is now in Attorney General Pam Bondi's court. She can decide to appoint a special prosecutor on this, and if she does and treats it like an ongoing conspiracy, the statute of limitation for old crimes goes away, and she can impanel a grand jury in a place like Florida, not District of Columbia. Why? Because Jack Smith raided President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Florida. So that'll be a big advantage for the prosecution. We'll keep you up to date.
So Pam Bondi's going to be doing this? What's the Pam Bondi narrative that is prevalent in public right now? Pam Bondi is the bad guy. Trump keeps saying she's doing a great job, exactly what he wants her to be doing. And she's got all this important stuff she's doing. But Pam Bondi, we're told, is the bad guy. Right as she's about to initiate the RICO Grande process. Isn't that crazy? It's like that, like the Grok thing. They knew that Grok was going to be announced as a military partner. And so that week you make Grok look like the worst, most dangerous platform ever. And maybe we can get the administration to stop. Well, somehow it doesn't work. It's crazy, isn't it? It never works. Let's continue, though, on the Bondi business. This is what Donald Trump posted on Saturday. And this, oh boy, did this make people mad. I mean, people love getting mad, especially at Donald Trump. Because, again, getting mad at Donald Trump, if you're on the uniparty right or on the uniparty left, everybody in your social circle is going to be impressed by you getting mad at Donald Trump. The communists will be impressed because they agree with you. And the other uniparty right establishment Republicans who are always tickle fighting with their liberal friends, they'll be impressed by it too. Oh, yes, I can see you have integrity because you are turning on Donald Trump based on that emotional story you saw on the screen. Smart. What's going on with my quote unquote boys and in some cases, quote unquote gals, Trump says. They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is doing a fantastic job. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world, and quote unquote selfish people are trying to hurt it. All over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. The guy never dies? Is he dead? Is he alive? Is he only a fictional construct? For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, Crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration who conned the world with Russia, with the Russia hoax, 51 quote unquote intelligence agents, quote, the laptop from hell, end quote, and more. They created the Epstein files, just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me. And now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands. Now that is a bold claim that we haven't really dealt with. The possibility that those people could have created the Epstein files. That makes it sound, and I'm just saying, I'm not saying what the underlying truth is. I'm saying it makes Trump sound as though he believes the Epstein files are a wide-ranging anti-Trump effort. Is that possible? Maybe. Depends on how long you think that Trump has been groomed for this role by the military or whoever else, and how far back you think this plan goes. I should have mentioned with the RICO thing, the statute of limitations is gone because it's just the most recent element of the crime, and anything else involved in the commission, the conspiracy to commit these crimes, can be counted no matter how far back it goes. Maybe it goes all the way back to Kennedy. I don't know. But let's keep going. Why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? They haven't even given up on the John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King Jr. files. No matter how much success we have had securing the border, deporting criminals, fixing the economy, energy dominance, a safer world where Iran will not have nuclear weapons, it's never enough for some people. We are about to achieve more in 6 months than any other administration has achieved in over 100 years, and we have so much more to do. We are saving our country and making America great again, which will continue to be our complete priority. And I would agree with him, by the way. Even just the tariffs thing and eliminating the top-down control apparatus over the world's economy is the greatest accomplishment of a president in 100 years. He says, and we have so much more to do. We are saving our country and making America great again, which will continue to be our complete priority. The left is imploding. Kash Patel and the FBI must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals instead of spending a month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired documents on Jeffrey Epstein. Let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. The 2020 election was rigged and stolen, and they tried to do the same thing in 2024. That's what she is looking into as AG and much more. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it is the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way and not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Well, it's definitely not true that nobody cares about it, okay? People do care about that story. That is undeniable. There is a good reason to care about that story to the extent that it is true. If it is true, it is an incredibly important story, okay? So nobody should let off the gas in terms of demanding the full truth from the administration. But think about what happened here. Donald Trump posted something he knew would go next level viral, okay? There was no way that post wasn't going to go viral and be seen by an enormous number of people. Now, I would imagine that most of the times that this post is covered by media, they're chopping out that whole last third where Donald Trump says that the FBI and Bondi should be focused on the rigged and stolen election of 2020. So that's the medicine. The viral post is the spoonful of sugar, and Trump can package that spoonful in ways like this and make sure that it is taken by virtually everybody. And I think that that is a major benefit to his communication style. Now, was the post created specifically for that goal or specifically with that goal in mind? Perhaps not. Maybe it's just an added benefit, but he's usually pretty conscious of those dynamics. What's going to go viral and why, and what impact it will have in the collective public consciousness. Let us continue. Here is Una Panuna Bonka.
Anna Paulina Luna. All right.
We'll just give the Gutfeld version. We haven't seen Una Panuna in a while, but she appeared at Charlie Kirk's Shill Fest over the weekend. It's not to say everybody there is a shill. Steve Bannon was there. He's awesome. And there were maybe a few other non-shills there. But otherwise, Turning Point USA events are total shill fests with college students flown in from around the country to attend, courtesy of Turning Point USA. And then they turn around and say, look how much college students love us. Incredible info up.
2024, because of my work and efforts in the previous Congress, I was charged with a task force to investigate some of the most grisly crimes in U.S. history, starting out with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. What I can tell you, and I would say that this model of transparency in the declassification of the JFK records is literally what they should be doing with Jeffrey Epstein.
Clap, you
retards. The administration
retards.
released tens of thousands of documents, and I will say credit due where it's deserved. The CIA director, Radcliffe, was the only CIA director in U.S. history who was able to release something called the Joe Neady's files. What this file proved, and it had been hidden for over 60 years, was without a doubt, and this is not my analysis, this is not my opinion, this is based on evidence that we have backings on. Without a doubt, the CIA engaged in a cover-up of the JFK assassination. The CIA lied to Congress. Joe Neady's, who was a CIA operative, did indeed have contact and was observing Lee Harvey Oswald, who in my opinion was a patsy and cover for multiple shooters in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. If you would have said that last year, a couple years ago, they would have called you conspiracy theorists. Yet every single person in this room knows conspiracy theory is only a matter of time before it's proven correct.
Now, isn't it interesting that all of this was actually done by Donald Trump, but there is also this extra layer of the Republican establishment taking credit for the things done by Donald Trump. Anna Paulina Luna was just taking credit for JFK files revelations. And she does give some credit to John Ratcliffe. John Ratcliffe, of course, works for President Trump. Anna Paulina Luna's task force What did they do? Anything? What has the Congress done? Since the beginning of 2023, has the Congress done anything? Nope. Passed spending packages and minor bills here and there that, who cares? Congress was totally illegitimate. It's illegitimate now. It was illegitimate under Biden, and Biden was illegitimate. So nothing that any of them have done for the last 5 years matters at all. I don't understand why she's out there taking credit for this, but again, I said this on Saturday. I've said it on this show before. I am like a full transparency absolutist. Okay. I don't think there should be any secrets from the people of the country. I think that they should be involved in these decisions. They should know what their government is doing. I don't think that there should be a bunch of secrets. Oh, only the military can know something this important. What? What makes that true? We're just told, well, bad things can happen if we don't allow them to keep secrets. Really? I mean, I guess keeping secrets from the enemy is kind of important if you're in the middle of a war, but keeping secrets from all your allies while you're attempting to guide your way forward is not a very good idea unless they have given you intentionally all of that authority to be able to do that. And I don't believe that that was ever intentionally given. I don't think the people said that the government should be allowed to tell them what government information they're allowed access to. The people own the government and everything about the government, at least if we're in the system as it's supposed to be. Okay. So I think people should have access to absolutely all of it. That said, I'm not going to just jump on the anti-Trump side on these issues because it's not full transparency yet. Okay. We got to wait and see what happens. I mean, how many times have these same people gone hard anti-Trump immediately, only to later find out that was all wrong? And anybody who went along with them got hoodwinked along with them, which means that person has one more claim that they have to say, oh, you know what? I was wrong about that too. Because these people keep hoodwinking them over and over again. You can imagine a scenario where all of this was laid out, specifically scripted in a plan, with Trump out of the picture. Would they still be disclosing these facts about what happened through these means? I would suggest yes, they absolutely would be doing that. If Kamala or Joe Biden or JD or Ron or Nikki Haley or whoever else was said to be the president of the United States of America, then we would have this effort from these congressmen, the oversight committee and their investigations, all this. That stuff would still be going on anyway. And because they're now both going on, Trump is here doing the things and the scripted op has not concluded. We're getting Trump doing the things, and then the people in the scripted op attempting to take personal credit for the things Trump did. It's very strange. These people are totally untrustworthy, by the way. I don't know how anybody takes these people seriously. Let us keep on moving. Keep on moving. Don't stop. No. This was from last year. Well, K-File over on X, formerly Twitter, posted this yesterday. Yesterday. But it was from an interview last year during the campaign. This is Fox News.
The FBI, all those institutions.
You're right.
Some people think that one way to build trust is to declassify things that everyone's talking about. I know you talked earlier about, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. So if you were president, would you declassify, you can answer yes or no to these. Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah.
I
did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know it. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would, or at least.
Do you think that would restore trust? Help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others. Certainly about the way he died. It'd be interesting to find out what happened there because that was a weird situation and the cameras didn't happen to be working, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I'd go a long way toward that one. The other stuff I would definitely do the January 6th because, beyond all of them. Because what happened? How about the Unselect Committee? They had meetings. They had all Democrats.
Okay, so he's worried about the phony stuff in it. What would the situation be if we had all the real Epstein evidence and added to all the real Epstein evidence a bunch of fake Epstein evidence that actually implicates all sorts of people that A, didn't do anything, and B, are enemies of that same regime? So maybe some of their people get sacrificed. Well, we're going to make it hurt the other side just as much. If there was phony information in there, how would you parse that? How would you handle that situation? Is that possible? Yes, it's possible. Do I know it's happening? No, but it is possible. And so we at least have to be open to the possibility. And, we don't trust that we understand what Trump is doing, but we understand that over the long arc of Trump, trusting him and understanding that he is headed in a direction, knowing that's the direction we need to go, that is a proper way to assess this. It's not full, unconditional trust, come what may. We have very strong reason to believe that this guy is headed in the right direction, and we can visibly see him leading us in that direction as well, and the country in that direction. So this guy probably deserves the benefit of the doubt, whereas all the people screaming about this guy online don't deserve any of it, including from the uniparty right media. This is Fox News, again, doing this interview. K-File, Andrew Kaczynski, who is
all those institutions.
You're right.
CNN. Sorry, I don't know why that started again. He said, I had not seen this Fox News extended interview with Trump from 2024, where they deliberately edited his Epstein answer, where he won't commit to releasing the full files because of phony stuff in it. So we have a situation where Fox News edited an interview with Donald Trump and changed the content. And this is right after Donald Trump finishes the settlement with CBS over editing a Kamala interview and trying to make Kamala look smart while she's actually brain dead. Kaczynski followed it up on X, formerly Twitter. Check out what Trump said versus what Fox edited. And you just heard what he said. Sorry, maybe I think that I grabbed the wrong post. Anyway, the long and short of it is, in the Fox News interview, they basically cut off after Trump said, yes, I would release the Epstein files, and didn't give the other caveats and hesitations. So take that for what it's worth, but an interesting difference there. It has sparked quite a bit of controversy over the last couple of weeks, worthwhile or not. Now, Eric Weinstein has talked about Jeffrey Epstein a number of times, and there were a bunch of clips going around yesterday of him discussing this. And unfortunately, many of them are, one of them is 13 minutes. One of them is 7.5 minutes. It's just not the kind of stuff we're going to go through on the podcast. But he was basically making the case that Jeffrey Epstein was a construct, a cutout, somebody that was created by the intelligence agencies, put in all these various positions. And because of that, he is essentially a totally unknown, except we can understand that someone was running him. Okay. And I think that that comports with a lot of what people believe, whether it's Mossad or someone else. Israel, of course, denies that it's Mossad. I think Ben Shapiro was out there denying that it's Mossad, which makes sense. but we don't know what his ultimate status is, because the whole thing is levels deep in the intelligence community's manufactured bullshit. Okay. That has to be accounted for somehow. We can't just say that we assume all of it's true because we're looking out for the children. It's not looking out for the children to believe a bunch of false things and be chasing down rabbits in rabbit holes. Okay. That's not helping children. Again, this is to provide no cover whatsoever for Jeffrey Epstein. I said on DPH the other night, actually, and I think this is important to understand. Donald Trump, to the extent that over the last 10 years or 9 years, whatever it is, eight and a half years that he's been president, to the extent that he has shut down the slave trade at the southern border, that is a major, major piece of the global human trafficking, sex trade, sex trafficking, and child trafficking apparatus. That is industrial scale saving kids. Okay. And everybody in the base believes that Trump has done that. And now he's saying that he might have to delay these files, or that the files that are the Epstein files, quote unquote, because now that denotes a particular set of information. If he's saying that some of that's phony, that it's designed by these nefarious characters to harm the America First movement, well, if you're shutting down the industrial scale child trafficking operation, and I think that probably, I should just say it this way, I think that probably entitles you to at least a little benefit of the doubt when it comes to the Jeffrey Epstein situation. Trump is obviously in a much better position to know what's in there than we are. And again, it's not just carte blanche, trust Trump. Push for full transparency. But punishing Donald Trump and siding with the people who have been anti-Trump at virtually every point for the last 10 years doesn't seem to make a lot of sense in my mind. Now, Chris Langan had some similar analysis along the same lines. And again, a lot of this stuff is stuff that the truth community has considered, that we talked about on this show, stuff you'll know, etc. But it's important, and I think he lays it out pretty well. He says, I see a couple things wrong here. I was in New York when Epstein and Maxwell began their sex trafficking ring in the late 90s. Epstein was already palling around with Trump in New York and Florida. I met Trump in the mid-90s at Mar-a-Lago entirely by accident. At the time, he was still married to Marla Maples, but they were clearly on the outs. I don't recall seeing Epstein there. I never heard from Epstein or Maxwell, yet my wife and I even had little Keith Raniere, Nancy Saltzman, and maybe one of the Bronfman sisters show up at a mega foundation conference in Connecticut trying to recruit me/us for Raniere's sex cult in Albany. Naturally, I declined. And he's talking about Nexium there. Raniere had a sex trafficking ring too, and he was definitely in the sexual blackmail business. Raniere knew very well that I had ideas worth following. If what Eric here says were true, why would neither Epstein nor Maxwell have been smart enough to realize it? Doesn't make any sense. If I can make virtually anyone in Epstein's former circle look like a monkey, or he's saying I can make everyone in Epstein's former circle look like a monkey. So if Epstein were really about controlling the scientific narrative and worldview, what was the little turd thinking? Epstein and Maxwell were running a sexual blackmail ring, plain and simple. And they had no interest in me because I wasn't blackmail material. I later met some people actually in the intelligence community and had reason to rethink this, but only as far as they were concerned. Epstein and Maxwell were another story. They sucked around big universities and big names for just one reason, to get close to the kinds of people susceptible to sexual blackmail. Besides, Eric was already a part of the globalist crowd. He even wrote the UN pilot document on mass immigration, migration for the benefit of all, towards a new paradigm for migrant labor. And he cites the abstract. Programs which import migrant workers offer the promise of increased productivity, lower consumer prices, cultural interchange, and higher living standards for workers coming from poor countries. So migrant workers there are then considered very good under that rubric. As for the increased productivity and lower consumer prices supposedly in the offing, we haven't seen any of those yet. Quite the opposite, in fact. But as for cultural interchange and higher living standards for migrant workers, we've seen entirely more than we ever wanted to. That's because we've been on the hook for it and frequently victimized by it. And let's continue with one more from Chris Langan. And by the way, Beth dropped 5 subscriptions in the Rumble chat for people over there. So thank you, Beth. Snowcat Operator, $20. Una Panuna Banca. The people get what they ask.
Una panuna banca.
It's beautiful. Another post from Langan. Comment on what he was saying. The real question is who's dealing for the Bronfmans now? We all know they won't just stop, okay? And so the Bronfmans are the Seagram's fortune, the Seagram's heirs, billionaire daughters who were tied up directly in the Nexium business. Response, they may feel that it's all sewn up now with their boys, Thiel, Zuck, and Elon, rolling in money and power. Anyway, the point is this. There's a very short, very clear chain leading directly from Epstein to Rainier and Nexium. It goes like this. Epstein, Les Wexner, Edgar Bronfman Sr., Claire and Sarah Bronfman, Edgar's daughters, Keith Rainier. Okay, so 5 degrees of separation there, all with people we know who definitely knew one another and were in the same sort of business. Very little has been made of this connection. It unfolds to this. In 1991, Wexner and Bronfman funded the Jewish Study Group, a pro-Israel lobby lobby group that reputedly influenced U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. Under the name MAGA, the group was associated with the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad as a, quote, vehicle for influence operations in the United States. In addition, there's been considerable overlap between the legal defense teams of Epstein and Rainier, from Alan Dershowitz to criminal defense attorney Mark Furnich, who represented not only Epstein and Rainier, but John Gotti and El Chapo. Do you follow? This wasn't some isolated operation in which Ghislaine glued herself to Epstein and they went on a sexual trafficking / blackmail toot just for the hell of it. It was a wide-ranging and top-down, all the way from Mossad with love. It was wide-ranging, I should say. Both Rainier and Epstein ended up in prison, and if they didn't know each other or understand that they were Israeli employees, it's some kind of miracle. Yet, to my knowledge, they were never connected by the press. Personally, I'm very happy to have stayed out of it. So all of that, I think, is very interesting from Chris Langan, and I just realized that I did not have that shared. The only clarification I would make from my perspective is that viewed through good twin, evil twin, it would be inaccurate to call that an Israeli operation. It could have been based in Israel as the top of the chain for the direction of the global regime, but it's a regime operation, okay? We can separate the Israeli thing, the Jewish thing. In terms of the regime, the identity as Jewish is a cover that provides them a narrative defense for people unwilling to, unwilling probably works, unwilling to engage with the fact that maybe not all Jews are oppressed and good people. Okay. And so I understand that identification of the regime figures as Jewish, they believe, and I think they believe correctly, provides them a narrative defense that they find very, very useful. Okay. And so implicating then Israel or Jews on their behalf is slightly inaccurate. I'm not saying it's wrong. Okay. In all cases, certainly. It's often very true. It's just not true in all cases. And so I think I prefer to try to get that as accurately as I believe we can see it. And I do believe we can see it that accurately. I don't think that we have to get totally dragged into that position. And again, if you read the Bible, many of the people accepting Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior were Jewish. And I think it's our responsibility as Christians to allow for the possibility that Jews might find Christ. And hence, then we are not entitled to do things like exterminate them, which is apparently what a lot of people out there seem to want to do. Okay. Let us move on from Langen. So these were the kinds of headlines we got over this past week. This is MediaIte. Trump was very angry with Dan Bongino, CNN reports. Let's listen to Anderson Cooper and Ben Shapiro with long hair. Tell us what's going on.
Is it clear where Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino, his career is headed tonight?
No, it's not clear, even to White House officials, Anderson, who were texting each other and texting me this morning asking, whether or not they had figured out if he had shown up to work today, because it was still an open question in Washington this morning if he was going to be back at the FBI today. And of course, he did eventually show up. We were told he had spent the weekend in Florida after not going there on Friday. But when it comes to what you just mentioned there about the relationship being untenable with the White House, he is staying in the job for right now. He is still the deputy director of the FBI right now, and he hasn't resigned or been fired. But the relationship has deteriorated so much that there are officials inside the White House who have not spoken to Dan Bongino in days, even though, of course, the question of whether or not he was still going to be employed by the federal government was still a big one for officials over the weekend. And I was told the president was very angry with Dan Bongino and also the FBI director, Kash Patel, to a degree, which is why you saw Patel put out that statement over the weekend saying he had no plans to resign and was going to work for Trump as long as he would have him. Obviously, right now, they're trying to basically just get their arms around the story and control it and stop the fallout from continuing as it's only continued to grow. And their base has only gotten angrier about not getting answers to the questions that they were told they were going to get answers to. And so, yes, Dan Bongino may stay in the job for right now. We have no indication that he's left, but there is a real question of the future of that relationship, especially given the ultimatum he made over the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, after she confronted him. And also just the fact that he's not speaking to a lot of people, whether that's in the White House or Evan Perez was told earlier he had not spoken to anyone at Justice Department leadership since last Wednesday. And obviously that is a key relationship for the deputy FBI director to have, and one that has just really deteriorated at this point.
So Dan Bongino is so mad and so sad about the Epstein files and Trump's position on the Epstein files that he did not come to work on Friday, and now he's thinking about resigning from the FBI. There have been various reports that he did or that he's going to, and we will obviously see. We're told that Donald Trump is very mad at Dan Bongino. Does that sound accurate? Could be. Could be. Maybe Dan Bongino's just doing something ultimately disappointing. Dan Bongino bailed out on the stolen election after 2020. Why did he do that? Part of a plan? Maybe. But we don't know that for sure. Let's take Trump at his word, just for the sake of discussion. Take Trump at his word that there's nothing but phony, destructive stuff in those quote unquote Epstein files, and that he's going to attempt to release as much as he can, but that he doesn't want to compromise people who actually had nothing to do with it based on phony information that was inserted into these files. If that is really what Trump is doing, if we just take him at his word, then Bongino pushing Trump to release those files might be something Bongino's mad at. It's a tough dynamic to navigate. People want to give Dan Bongino the credit and the benefit of the doubt. I see absolutely no reason to do that. Dan Bongino is a rage baiter. He was on cable news and a very wealthy, top-ranked podcaster during the age of censorship. It was him and Ben Shapiro, always at the top of the charts, even though they were these hard, far-right people who were Trump supporters. Really? Now, maybe he's a great guy. I don't know Dan Bongino. Okay. I don't like make a habit of trying to judge these people's souls. But do I trust that guy? Am I just going to give Dan Bongino the benefit of the doubt? Of course not. Okay. That would be absolutely bonkers for me to do that, because he's not even a straight shooter on his own show. He also happens to be the purveyor of the entire official story about assassination event number 1. Now, is he doing that as just the greatest undercover white hat of all time in the media, as this crucial figure to roll out the information up? Maybe, but also maybe not. Wasn't it strange how what was her name? Kim something at the Secret Service last year, the night of the event, Dan Bongino was like, oh, well, you got to look into this Secret Service head. I think it's going to be this person. It was clearly an info op that rolled out after that. That's Dan Bongino fronting an info op about an event that is highly questionable. He did that many times, always as rage bait, always to trigger people emotionally, get them on his side emotionally. Why would you trust someone like that? Let us continue. This is the world's leading purveyor of trans content at the Daily Weimar, Matt Walsh. He said, up until 10 seconds ago, there was unanimous agreement that Epstein was a pedophile and child sex trafficker with high-profile clientele who all must be exposed and brought to justice. Now, out of the blue, we're being told that none of that is true, and that anyone who believes this thing that everyone believed is a whack job and a conspiracy theorist. This is the kind of shameless 180-degree unexplained pivot that leftists typically specialize in. Very weird to see it happening on the right. Elon Musk responds, easy to tell who is a paid influencer. Is that what's happening? I don't know. Matt Walsh is not a grand purveyor of truth as he creates his nonstop gender and race content for years and years on end, still convincing people, oh, people really don't know the difference between who has the wee-wees and who has the hoo-ha's. Nobody can tell. People aren't aware of that conversation yet. I better throw it in your faces. For 10 years. 10 years. We've been doing the anti-wokeness and all this nonsense from the normie sphere on the uniparty right, many of whom are connected directly to Peter Thiel. And, the Daily Weimar is run by Republican donors, okay? They are doing the bidding of high-profile interests, and they are extremely pro-Israel, Israel first even, in a way that they cover by being anti-woke and super based and red-pilled like this. Well, what does it mean, by the way, that everybody agreed, there was unanimous agreement of who and what Jeffrey Epstein was? What does that mean? How do we achieve those conditions, generally speaking, in the media environment, the censorship environment, the propaganda environment? How do we achieve those conditions? I would suggest through significant manipulation of the conversation with certain people tasked to do exactly that. All right. And I think that that's how we can see this thing operating and working. All of a sudden, just over the last 2 years, we start hearing about Epstein all the time from Tucker Carlson and the rest of them. You can give them the benefit of the doubt if you want, but I don't. I watch the same purveyors of nonsense and bullshit who all pretty much ignored our stolen elections, called Joe Biden the president, just continuing to do the exact same things that they were doing. And Charlie Kirk just put all of them on stage over the weekend to do exactly that. Now, maybe this is all orchestrated from the top for some grand design that I am not privy to. That is entirely possible, okay? And I'm not discounting that possibility. But one of the other things I've also witnessed over the last week and a half, let's say, well, what is it, 8-9 days, is the proliferation of bot swarms on Truth Social, all of them attempting to cleave Trump's base from Trump on the Epstein issue. There are bot swarms pushing that position. Just like there were bot swarms pushing the anti-Trump position on Ron DeSantis. The entire DeSantis simp op was supported by bot swarms. And I believe that the members of the op were directing those bot swarms. And that's why they were following those bots, people like Thomas Massey and Harmeet Dillon. Okay. The bot swarms were there. That much is obvious. There were also bot swarms for the NAFO operation, the North Atlantic Fellows Organization, the cute little dog cartoons that spent all their time harassing everyone online about Ukraine. And Adam Kinzinger was right alongside them. Okay, so when you see bot swarms, you got to wonder, what's that for? Why is this particular issue? Why is this an attack point? And why are they trying to shut down certain speech from certain people using that as an attack point? You can go in my Truth Social. I posted a thing about the invasion on Saturday. And in the comments, I don't know if it's 100 bots, but 30, 40, 50, it's a lot. And you can go to their accounts. You can see who they're following. It's like 8 people, all of whom have the same critical feature as the bot account, which is they were just started last week or a few weeks ago. Why did they start so many of these accounts a few weeks ago? Why did people join Donald Trump's platform to harass MAGA supporters about Jeffrey Epstein? And of course, they're not people, they're bots. Okay. And you can recognize the accounts. You can see how they respond. They post terrible memes. One of them the other day posted something that was clearly written by AI. And when you think about that, kind of becomes more prevalent. How does AI sound? Well, AI sounds, generally speaking, like snarky leftist journalists. Okay. If they are trained by normies and bot swarms and influence operations, they're going to sound just as clever and smart and informed as the media figures who are used as input. Okay. So you can see a bot swarm forming to cleave Trump from his base over the issue of Jeffrey Epstein. When you know that effort is out there and real, we should be really cautious to support that effort, to do anything that aligns with that effort. Okay. And as far as I'm concerned, that sort of thing is enough to say, hands off on this for a little while. We can see what the attack points are coming at Donald Trump, and got to wonder what that means. This is The Hill. This morning. This is The Hill this morning. Trump faces MAGA midterm warnings on Epstein. Conservative influencers and personalities furious at the Trump administration's announcement that it will not release any more information surrounding disgraced financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein have repeatedly issued a warning. This will cost Republicans in the midterm. So The Hill, a mainstream publication, the first person they cite is Liz Wheeler. She was that little blonde lady who was invited to the White House to take part in the Epstein Files binder op. And then she advertised to the public that this was the greatest administration when it comes to transparency that had ever existed. And we should all be super happy that people like Liz Wheeler were the ones who got the Epstein files, even though she works for the Blaze, even though she is not very bright, and even though she brings on purveyors of anti-Trump ops all the time and has for years. Like, and anti-MAGA too. It's not just about everybody has to kiss Trump's ass. I don't care about that. Okay. Bannon, and again, Steve Bannon is pushing these ops and providing cover, saying that MAGA has some interest in this too. He is the only believable media person about any of these people, which means he could be taking them as a Judas goat right off the cliff. He said it would cost Republicans 10% of the MAGA movement and cause the GOP to lose 40 seats in the midterms and the presidency in 2028 if these files weren't put out. Are elections real? No. Okay. So any calculation, any analysis that brings the midterms 16 months away into the picture is a false analysis. The theory is that disappointment over the Epstein decision will depress voter enthusiasm for Trump and by extension, all Republicans, resulting in some voters who care about the issue staying home or even voting for a Democrat instead. The Justice Department and FBI last week asserted in a memo that Epstein did die by suicide and did not have a client list. Officials declined to blah, blah, blah. Backstory. Okay. The midterms are a long way away, and national Republican strategists are now largely dismissing the prospect of the Epstein files being much of a factor. And of course, they're right. It's not going to be a factor in the midterms. And Steve Bannon, of course, knows that, which suggests he's putting pressure on the situation for a particular reason, unrelated to the stated reason. This is Axios with their big headline from yesterday. MAGA's siege mentality shadows Trump's golden age. And it says it twice for some reason. Suspicion is rippling through the MAGA movement, clouding a historic run of conservative victories meant to lay the foundation for President Trump's golden age. Even at the apex of power, MAGA's populist base remains convinced that shadowy forces are working to unravel its every game. Trump's recent actions, especially his administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case, have only hardened those fears. At Turning Point USA's Student Action Summit over the weekend, the mood among Trump's most loyal supporters was celebratory on the surface, but crackling with anxiety underneath. And it is odd that mainstream media outlets are citing the Charlie Kirk event so profusely and prolifically. There's many of them doing it all over the place. This is their new anti-Trump narrative. These are the MAGA people. You can see all these MAGA influencers. All of them are MAGA, and all of them are mad at Donald Trump. Therefore, the base should side with all of them against Donald Trump. Widespread, broad media push for acceptance by the public. I mentioned Axios last week and Bannon's role with Axios, talking about how it seemed like Bannon was the person initiating the Dan Bongino and Kash Patel aspect. They're very mad at Pam Bondi because it went to Mark Caputo at Axios, a frequent War Room guest, and Laura Loomer, who is also a frequent War Room guest. Here is Steve Bannon talking about Axios.
Opposed to the press, but President Trump has been known to call an audible. I think that's what the Axios leaks are about. Folks should know when they say, "Oh, your Axios fake news." Au contraire, I think it's the number one source where the administration leaks to when they want to put out something and get it out ahead of the mainstream media.
How about that? Axios is the outlet that someone close to the Trump administration consistently leaks to. That's who got the Epstein letter in the first place, isn't it? Was the letter signed? No. Do we know who the letter came from? Nope. Just saying. Let's keep going. So Steve Bannon continued yesterday calling out all of the people who had been demanding the Trump files initially, and then going back on it, saying, I trust the government. We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. So Bannon, in a series of posts on Getter, kept saying he got the call, he took the call, or she in some cases. Here is the Charlie Kirk case. This is from Getter, and I believe this was just yesterday. So Bannon says, and just like that, ... and encloses this clip of Charlie Kirk posted over on X, formerly Twitter, by Ken Klippenstein, who calls himself an independent journalist, but is a standard issue villager. Here is Charlie Kirk's commentary about the position he's taking from his show yesterday.
Honestly, I'm done talking about Epstein for the time being. I'm going to trust my friends in the administration. I'm going to trust my friends in the government to do what needs to be done, solve it, balls in their hands. I've said plenty this last weekend. So if you guys want to see my commentary on it, that's fine. Honestly, I'm done talking.
Kind of amazing. He's just done talking about it. He said all the things. You can find his commentary online to know that he said the good things. And now he's just going to take this position. I trust the government. The ball's in their court. They can do whatever they want. Now, we can give Trump the benefit of the doubt, but why would we trust the government? And Charlie Kirk says, my friends in the administration. Okay. Who are your friends in the administration? And what exactly did they say? Can we hear those things, or you're just communicating to us that everything's fine now? Here is Laura, the headline with Laura Ingraham from Mediaite. Laura Ingraham scolds conservative influencers over Epstein infighting she helped stoke last week. And linking that article, Steve Bannon said, got the call, took the call. Let's keep going. This is Mediaite referencing Dinesh D'Souza. D'Souza tells viewers it's time to move on from Epstein. They have closed the case. Bannon said, got the call, took the call. And he also highlighted this response from none other than Matt Gaetz. And you will know, if you are a longtime viewer of this show, that I am a Matt Gaetz fan. I believe that Matt Gaetz is tasked with doing exactly what he's doing. He was the man who pressed John Durham in those hearings in Congress a couple of years ago. I think Gaetz has always had a significant role to play, and that's why they tried to take him down. But here is the Matt Gaetz response from X, formerly Twitter. Oops, didn't share it yet. Got to share it first. Learn my lesson. Here we are. Almost there. There we go. There we go.
President Trump never stopped building a business empire, a media empire, a political empire. We believe he has exactly the team to maximize success. Let's start with Pam Bondi. The Attorney General always takes a lot of flack in any administration, but look at what she has accomplished. The Bondi team successfully litigated away the judicial coup of nationwide injunctions. They did that. They won that for us. They have created the legal infrastructure for highly effective deportations. She's got the cartels self-deporting. She has targeted the criminals and the gang networks. Attorney General Pam Bondi is a star and has our full admiration and support. To those who don't share my enthusiasm, look at how far we've come. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is the reason Hillary Clinton got away with everything. The statute of limitations is passed to hold her accountable. Thanks, Jeff. He got the unceremonious beating he deserved on the way out the door from Senator Tommy Tuberville. After Sessions, we got Bill Barr. AG Barr is the reason legitimate questions about the 2020 election went uninvestigated by the Department of Justice. I personally know of cases Bill Barr shut down that related to voter fraud that could have told us a lot more about the networks and the people who are trying to destabilize our elections and our voting process. You don't think you're getting all the answers you want on Epstein? We never got the answers on an election that resulted in a dementia ward escapee being president for 4 years. After Bill Barr was Jeff Rosen. He was the acting attorney general. He allowed MAGA grandmothers to be hunted like Pam Bondi is hunting MS-13. Pam Bondi is the best attorney general Donald Trump has had by a factor of 10,000. And anyone who disagrees with me is welcome to come on this show and choose their fighter. Which Trump AG would you replace Pam Bondi with? Barr, Sessions, Rosen? She's the best, and we appreciate her service.
He keeps going on. It's worth noting that Matt Gaetz was slated for the attorney general role prior to Pam Bondi, and JD Vance went to the Senate to argue on behalf of Matt Gaetz. They went together. JD took Matt for a tour of the Senate to argue in favor of Matt Gaetz's confirmation by the Senate. So here we have Pam Bondi. Now, what do we make of this? He said some things that clearly aren't true in that short clip. There's just no avoiding that. Then you got the Sessions and Barr thing. I keep those people in the question mark column at this point. You know, I'm not saying that the story doesn't outline their behavior as he described. The official story definitely does outline that. But I think a lot of people with good reason have a disbelief in all the elements of that official story. We might find out that Jeff Sessions has been doing important work. I believe that Jeff Sessions appointed John Huber to investigate many of these things. And I think that Huber's probably going to be, his work is going to be involved in RICO Grande. I haven't spent much time on that lately, so I hope I'm stating those things correctly. Jeff Sessions involved with that. Bill Barr, who knows? Did he shut down investigations into the fake election of 2020? Yeah. But did Trump want him to do that because he was going to step back in the narrative and do whatever he's doing behind the scenes, devolution or whatever it is it turns out was going on at that time? I would say Barr helped to facilitate that. Did he do it as a reflection of his own internal character, or was he asked to do it? And these are the important questions to ask throughout these issues as they continue building. Now, today, we had a vote in the House Rules Committee, I should say, over blocking the Epstein files. Full list of Republicans who blocked Epstein files vote. This is from Newsweek. And it's worth mentioning that one of the key players at Newsweek is a guy named Josh Hammer, frequent War Room guest and a leading DeSantis simp who went anti-MAGA whenever it was called for and now pretends that he's been one of MAGA's best friends all along. Super dishonest. He was actually the one in the debate. So one of the things at the TPUSA event was a debate between Josh Hammer and Dave Smith, because Dave Smith, the comedian, who I guess is supposed to be funny. He doesn't seem funny. Maybe he is. I don't know. But he goes on Rogan all the time. Dave Smith is like the super based and red-pilled normie who tells everyone how it really is when it comes to Israel or whatever else. And so he debated Josh Hammer over the Epstein files, and now he hates Trump and goes on and talks about how much he regrets that he voted for Donald Trump, as if voting is real. It's all so stupid. But these people are the people shaping the conversation now. So it's important to recognize where this information is coming from. 7 House Republicans voted against a motion on Monday that would have allowed a congressional vote regarding the release of files in Jeffrey Epstein's case. Representative Ro Khanna, the Democrat from California, tabled an amendment for a House vote requiring Attorney General Pam Bondi to preserve and release any records related to Jeffrey Epstein. The motion was defeated 5-7. One Republican member, Ralph Norman, voted yes alongside Democrats. Republican Representative Chip Roy missed the vote. Isn't that crazy? Chip Roy got out of voting on the blockage of the Epstein files. Amazing. Chip Roy gets to retain super based and red-pilled pro-MAGA status while dropping out of this particular vote. Thank goodness his vote wasn't needed, right? Chairwoman Virginia Fox of North Carolina, Michelle Fischbach of Minnesota, Eric Huchin of Indiana, Nick Langworthy of New York, Austin Scott of Georgia, Morgan Griffith of Virginia, and Brian Jack of Georgia. Are any of those states hosts of legitimate elections? I would suggest that none of them are. Okay. Indiana is a solidly red state, but so is Texas. Texas elections are fake. And there's plenty of record of Texas elections being fake. Trump actually highlighted the success that he had in Texas elections just yesterday. And while we're on the subject, it might be worth pulling it up because I thought it was a really interesting post although I don't want to spend much time on it. And we are going to wrap up soon, despite the fact that, as usual, I did not get anywhere close to talking about all the things I wanted to discuss. Donald J. Trump just spoke to our great congressmen and women of Texas. One of them sent me my results in Texas, and I didn't even know how well I did, but here they are. Won by 1.5 million votes, and almost 14%. Also won all of the border counties along Mexico, something which has never happened before. I keep hearing about Texas going blue, but it is just another Democrat lie. With the right candidate, Texas isn't going blue anytime soon. We're going to have to keep having the right candidates. Otherwise, a deal will be made and the Uniparty will get their selection. The elections are fake, okay? It's great that Donald Trump did a really good job in the campaign convincing people, yes, this is the right choice, but the elections are fake. So the victory margin is also a factor of that fakeness. And what happened down ticket, down ballot, that is what ultimately matters, because that's where the subversion of Donald Trump is continuing to come from. Black Hat Destroyer gifted 5 subscriptions over on Rumble. Thank you very much for that support. And thank you for hanging out and participating in the chat. Also, if you can, if it's not too much trouble, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, please hit the thumbs up. Theoretically, that helps. I don't know if it actually helps, especially probably doesn't help when I'm saying it 3 hours and 20 minutes into the podcast. But, this is how life goes sometimes. We are getting close to the end. So Republicans on the Rules Committee blocked the release of the Epstein files from Congress. Now that is interesting. Was that all something that was already going to happen? Or is that happening in response to the Epstein letter that started this whole thing 8 days ago, 9 days ago? It all seems pretty programmed and scripted. And so if they knew that Congress was going to vote, if the Trump team knew that Congress was going to vote on this, would they preempt it by getting people to go all in? This is bad against Donald Trump to release the Epstein files and then force them all to watch the Republicans in Congress do the same thing? Now, the story is going to be that all these Republicans in Congress did what Donald Trump wanted them to do. But the only one of those people who is even considered to be pro-Trump is Ralph Norman, the guy that voted the other direction. So is it plausible and believable that those other establishment uniparty right members of Congress, and maybe some of them, I just don't know them well enough, and if I don't want to besmirch anybody or cast aspersions on them all, if I don't, like Eric Huchin, I don't know this guy. But if you get elected as a Republican in New York, well, something happened. And we can see that all the time with people like Mike Lawler. So I don't anticipate that any of these people would be doing Trump's bidding, especially when it's something that is opposite what the people seem to want. And so if that was already coming, and it was preempted last week, well, then we have an entirely different dynamic that might not be the correct way to see it, but has to be accounted for, because that is absolutely possible. And I think that we've seen plenty of examples, and I gave multiple examples last week of Trump manipulating the conversation back and forth. We talked about that with good cop, bad cop. We talked about that with the false starts, like the Grok 3 going MechaHitler before Yacarino resigned and Grok 4 comes out. Seems like an info op designed to short circuit an info op that's coming in the future that they know is coming. And this could well be the same thing. One more clip from Bannon here.
It's got the front page of the Washington Post, not digitally, but actually how the front page looks. One of the lead stories, documents show CIA had connection with JFK's assassin. From the Washington Post, documents show CIA had connection with JFK's assassin. What happened? What would America be like if on Friday night the 22nd of November, 1963, Walter Cronkite and Eric Sevareid or Huntley Brinkley had come before the American people and say that the Central Intelligence Agency had a relationship or had connections, had been monitoring Lee Harvey Oswald? Think that weekend would have been a little different? Yep, that's how they roll. Do you control this government? You do not. Even all the hard work you've done, everything with President Trump, you've done. You see, he's just like Kennedy is being surrounded by many dark forces. You can see the dark forces gathering around President Trump. It's pretty obvious. If you see what you see, it's pretty obvious.
See what you see. It's pretty obvious. There are dark forces gathering around Donald Trump. People that we are meant to believe are aligned with him, but are actually subverting his efforts. Just saying. At some point, you got to consider the mainstream media people on the uniparty right, and that is what they are, might be part of those dark forces. Donald Trump addressed the Epstein thing today in an appearance outside the White House. Here we are.
On Epstein, the Attorney General briefed you on the DOJ and FBI review, the findings of that review. The Attorney General briefed you on that.
What? On the
DOJ and FBI
on what?
review.
On what subject?
Epstein.
Okay.
On Epstein, of the review of the files. Attorney General Pam Bondi.
A very quick briefing.
Did she tell you, what did she tell you about the review? And specifically, did she tell you at all that your name appeared in the file?
No. She's given us just a very quick briefing, and in terms of the credibility of the different things that they've seen. And I would say that, these files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, they were made up by the Biden, we went through years of that with the Russia hoax, with all of the different things that we had to go through. We've gone through years of it, but she's handled it very well. And it's going to be up to her. Whatever she thinks is credible, she should release. Yeah.
On Texas.
And it's amazing. Caroline Levitt is right next to him in the shot. So he's basically reiterating what he said in his post. He's getting Pam Bondi's back, and we're just going to have to see how that turns out. I understand the urge to have an opinion on the subject. Okay. And a strong opinion at that, because it's an important issue. But if that urge is accompanied by immediately sacrificing the guy that has brought us this far, it's probably a mistake. And if it's happening based on an emotional reaction to what we saw on the screen as relayed to us by those people, I think it's probably a mistake, right? And again, you got to hold Trump accountable, got to hold everybody accountable, got to demand the truth and transparency. But what you don't have to do is jump onto the anti-Trump side because the TV characters said to. And again, this is not the only issue they're doing that about right now. And I had a long Ukraine segment. Maybe I'll do it on Friday. But the long and short of it is, there are now reports that Trump is going to send more arms to Ukraine via NATO. Mark Rutte, Trump's guy, who's the Secretary General of NATO, was at the White House yesterday. He was just there. This is his second trip in the last 4 or 5 months. I think early March was the last one. So 4 months. We're supposed to be sending weapons to Ukraine via NATO. Okay. NATO basically defunct, or, potentially in the future, I think it will be. I think that NATO has to be done away with. And the Russia stuff all makes sense. If there is any coordination at all to remove the global regime's apparatus, I would think that NATO would have to be a part of that then collapses. And I would suggest the United Nations would be as well. And we can hope for all these globalist organizations to be removed. But people got very, very mad. Trump ran on ending the Russia-Ukraine war and getting peace because he wants people to stop dying. And here he is sending weapons to Ukraine. They're reported to be long-range missiles able to attack Moscow. And that's going to start World War III. And the story makes a lot of sense, okay? And standard issue villagers are going to hear that story and be like, How could Trump do this? He said we're not going to fund Ukraine anymore. Even my podcast heroes say that funding Ukraine is the worst thing in the world that anybody could ever do. And so you have another thing where, do they understand? Can you ask them questions and inquire about the Ukraine issue? And they can answer those questions? No. With any proof? No. With any sound logic or reasoning? No. Did they take that position from the very beginning of the Ukraine thing? No. So how are they authoritative to opine on what Donald Trump is doing vis-a-vis Ukraine? They have no idea. First of all, weapons we send out, countless reports over the last few years, everything coming from the so-called Biden administration being sent over to Ukraine, didn't make it. They made it onto the black weapons market. So are the weapons going to reach Ukraine in the first place? Then, of course, there's the time, the duration where they need to train on these particular weapons to be able to use them. All these different delays. They never actually reach the battlefield. So we have that as one reason not to worry about this, potentially, right? I'm not saying which the right thing will be, but there is also the idea that Ukraine, insofar as it's described to us by the mainstream media, includes that whole eastern portion, the Donbass and Crimea. Okay? But those are Russia. And so most of the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia's very brutal invasion, has been fought in Russia to the extent it's being fought at all. And it always was fought in Russia because the global regime's lines that they draw on the map are irrelevant. And those lines are getting redrawn back to how they were before, and maybe to an entirely new way, but certainly not with the regime as it stands. Now, Russia also seems like it's going to take Odessa at some point, and in the story sense, I'm saying. And so the situation has to be allowed to develop until that finally happens. And all of these things will be massive defeats for the global regime. Odessa is a key port, so I think it has to be turned over at some point. But I will save any of the rest of it with the Ukraine stuff for Friday and just reiterate that something we don't know to be bad that Trump has said is being used as the worst possible thing to get us to abandon Trump by the same people who have been trying to do that for 10 years. Maybe we should pay attention to all of these machinations, okay? Because that's what's happening. We're watching the gears work with one another rather than taking each story as an isolated incident and then allowing our emotional reaction to guide our thinking. That is a recipe for disaster all the time. That is how we were conditioned to think by the machine. Did the machine condition us to think that way for our benefit or for the benefit of the machine? There's not even a question there, okay? So if we are engaged in the same mental process that we've been conditioned to engage in, then we are not eliminating the brainwashing, okay? And we don't get to select individual cases like, oh, well, I can tell as a very serious truther, I can tell that this story's not made up. No, you can't, okay? You should assume that they're all made up and then see which ones prove themselves in reality from observing them in the world, direct knowledge, from sound logic, and from first principles. And if you can't get there, give that subject up completely. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up there. I will check the chat once again before we go. Thank you all for being supportive on YouTube and on Substack and over there at the home base on Rumble. And I guess, it also streams to Getter. They never get any love. Hey, shout out to Getter people. Thanks, Getter people. And I was supposed to put it out on Telegram, and I forgot to start the feed on Telegram. So, hey, Telegram people, you're screwed. Now you're just going to have to watch it in a different way. Okay. And with that, I will be back on Friday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden was never president.
Well,
what?
You know who I am, don't you? Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
What's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
It's not true. It's more true than I would perhaps prefer.
Let you down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
What?
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon, down on the range.